Hey there, and welcome to Crime for Sleep. I know you're having trouble falling asleep, so let me keep you company with true crime stories from around the world. Before we dive in, I'm curious, where did you first hear this one? If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now get comfortable, and let's get into tonight's case. Crime 1, I was hired to do minor repairs in an old duplex. The neighbor next door had recently moved out, so I was asked to inspect both units. In the far corner of one room, under an old carpet, I found a wooden panel sealed with rusted hinges. It looked like it hadn't been opened in years. Curiosity got the better of me, so I forced it open. What I saw was a steep drop into a narrow shaft. At the bottom was a small cell, bare, cold, and lined with stained mattresses. Hooks hung from the ceiling. One of them still held a chain, snapped at the end. I called the landlord, but he hung up as soon as I mentioned it. The next day, the trapdoor was gone, wood replaced, carpet glued down. I never told anyone else, but sometimes I still hear knocking beneath my floorboards, and it's not coming from my side. The smell hit me first when I returned to finish the job. Bleach, strong enough to burn my nostrils, but underneath it lurked something else, something organic and wrong. I've worked construction for 15 years, and I know the difference between cleaning supplies and cover-ups. The new floorboards were installed perfectly, too perfectly. The grain didn't match the rest of the room, and the wood looked machine-cut, not weathered like everything else in that old duplex. I started asking questions. The landlord claimed he knew nothing about any trapdoor, said I must have been seeing things, that old buildings play tricks on your mind, but his voice shook when he said it and he wouldn't meet my eyes. The previous tenant had lived there for 8 years, he told me. Quiet guy, kept to himself, paid rent on time, never caused problems. The way he described him felt rehearsed, like he'd said those exact words before. I went to the local hardware store where I'd bought supplies for the job. The clerk remembered the landlord coming in 2 days after I found the trapdoor. He bought industrial-grade adhesive, soundproofing foam, and enough lumber to redo a small floor, paid in cash. The clerk thought it was odd because most contractors put materials on account, but the landlord insisted on cash and seemed nervous about the whole transaction. The investigation started eating at me. I couldn't sleep without thinking about those stained mattresses, about the snapped chain still swaying from that hook. I began watching the duplex from my truck during lunch breaks. The new tenant moved in within a week, a young woman, maybe early 20s. She worked nights and came home in the morning, always alone, always looking over her shoulder as she unlocked the door. I tried talking to neighbors on the street. Most claimed they'd never noticed anything unusual about the previous tenant, but one elderly woman who lived across the street admitted she'd sometimes heard strange sounds coming from the duplex. Muffled crying, she said, voices that didn't sound like conversation. She'd called the police twice, but they said they couldn't investigate noise complaints without specific evidence of wrongdoing. The police reports were public record. I found them at the courthouse. 2 complaints filed against the address, both dismissed as unfounded, but there were other reports too. Missing person cases from the surrounding area. 3 women in 2 years, all young, all last seen walking alone near the duplex's neighborhood. The cases remained open but had gone cold months ago. I started following up on those missing persons. The families were desperate for answers, grateful that someone still cared enough to ask questions. Each woman had been living alone, working night shifts, struggling financially. The kind of people who might respond to an offer of cheap rent or temporary shelter. The kind of people whose disappearance might not be immediately noticed. One family showed me their daughter's phone records from the weeks before she vanished. Multiple calls to the same number, which I traced back to a classified ad for affordable housing. The ad had been posted by someone using the previous tenant's name, offering below-market rent for the right person. Young women preferred, no references required, cash only. The phone number was disconnected now, but I found the ad archived online. The wording was careful, designed to attract vulnerable people without seeming predatory. It mentioned privacy, discretion, and understanding for people going through difficult times. Reading it made my skin crawl because I recognized the psychology behind it. This wasn't random. This was planned. I confronted the landlord again, armed with what I'd learned. This time he was different, hostile instead of nervous. He threatened to have me arrested for harassment and trespassing, said I was making up stories to cover my own incompetence as a contractor. But when I mentioned the missing women, something shifted in his expression. Fear replaced anger. He knew more than he was admitting. The new tenant started looking sick. I saw her coming home from work and she'd lost weight. Her skin had a gray pallor and she moved like someone constantly exhausted. When I tried to approach her, she hurried inside and wouldn't answer her door. But I could hear her inside, pacing back and forth, like she was trapped in a cage. I went back to the hardware store. The same clerk was there, and this time he was more talkative. He remembered the previous tenant, too. Said the guy came in regularly, always buying strange combinations of items. Padlocks and chains, soundproofing materials, heavy-duty cleaning supplies. The clerk had wondered about it, but minded his own business. He regretted that now. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The postal worker who delivered mail to the duplex for years contacted me after hearing I was asking questions around the neighborhood. She'd always been suspicious about the previous tenant because he received packages addressed to different women's names. When she asked about it, he claimed they were relatives staying with him temporarily. But she never saw any women coming or going, and the packages kept coming for months after he said they'd moved away. I obtained copies of the delivery records, 7 different women's names over 2 years. The packages contained items that suggested long-term stays, clothing, personal care products, medications, but none of these women had forwarding addresses when they supposedly moved. Their mail just stopped coming one day without any change of address forms filed. The pattern was becoming clear, but the evidence remained circumstantial. I needed something concrete, something that would force the authorities to take action. I decided to search the property more thoroughly, looking for anything the hasty cover-up might have missed. Working alone after dark, I examined every inch of the duplex's exterior. In the basement, behind the water heater, I found something that made my blood freeze. Scratches in the concrete wall, not random marks, but deliberate scratching. Someone had been clawing at that wall, trying to escape. The scratches formed letters, barely visible but unmistakable when you knew what to look for. 7 different sets of initials, each followed by dates. The dates corresponded to the missing persons reports. Each woman had left her mark, a final desperate attempt to prove she'd been there. The scratches were deep enough to have drawn blood. I could see dark stains in the concrete around them, stains that no amount of bleach could completely erase. I documented everything with photographs and measurements, but when I returned the next morning with the police, the scratches were gone. The entire section of wall had been resurfaced with fresh concrete. Someone had been watching me, had seen me discover their secret, and had moved quickly to eliminate the evidence. The police were skeptical of my claims without physical proof. They said the missing women could have gone anywhere, that people disappear for many reasons. The landlord produced documentation showing the previous tenant had moved out voluntarily, had even provided a forwarding address. Everything appeared legitimate on paper. But I knew what I'd seen: the trapdoor, the cell, the chains, the scratches in the concrete. Someone had used that duplex as a prison, and multiple women had suffered there. The system had failed them, and now it was failing me by refusing to investigate properly. The new tenant disappeared 3 weeks later. Her employer reported her missing when she failed to show up for work. Her apartment showed no signs of struggle, no indication of where she might have gone. Just like the others, she seemed to have vanished without a trace, but I knew she hadn't left voluntarily. I continue watching the duplex, but it remains empty now. The landlord claims he's having trouble finding reliable tenants. Sometimes I see him there with other men, going in and out at odd hours, always careful to check if anyone's watching. They're planning something new, finding a different way to continue their operation. The families of the missing women still call me sometimes. They want updates, hope for closure. I tell them I'm still investigating, but the truth is I feel helpless. The evidence has been destroyed, the witnesses have disappeared, and the authorities consider the case closed before it ever really opened. Late at night, when the neighborhood is quiet, I park across from the duplex and listen. The knocking I mentioned before has gotten stronger, more insistent. It's not coming from my floorboards anymore. It's coming from beneath the duplex itself, from somewhere deeper than that hidden cell I discovered. Something is still down there, still trying to get out. I know I should stop obsessing over this case, should move on with my life and let the dead rest. But those initials scratched into the concrete wall haunt me. 7 women tried to leave proof they existed, tried to ensure someone would know what happened to them. I'm the only person who saw their final messages, and I failed to preserve them. The landlord still lives in the neighborhood. I see him sometimes at the grocery store or gas station. He always watches me when he thinks I'm not looking, probably wondering if I'll ever give up my investigation. But he doesn't understand that this isn't just about solving a crime anymore. It's about honoring the memory of women whose names no one remembers, whose disappearances no one mourns. I keep their initials written in a notebook, along with the dates I found scratched in that concrete wall. Someday, when I have enough evidence to make people listen, I'll tell their stories properly. Until then, I'll keep watching and waiting, because someone needs to remember that they were here, that they fought to survive, that they deserved better than to disappear without a trace. The knocking continues every night, a reminder that some secrets refuse to stay buried, no matter how much concrete you pour over them. Crime 2, it started with fog. Every time I looked into the bathroom mirror, the glass was coated with a strange film like breath or steam, but the rest of the room was perfectly clear. Then the reflection changed. I could see everything else, tiles, towels, the door, but not myself, just empty space where I should have been. I thought I was hallucinating until I recorded it. Watching the video back, I saw something worse. A figure did appear behind where I should have been. It stood still, head tilted, as if waiting. I smashed the mirror that day, but shards of it still sit in the trash, and they still don't show me. That was 3 months ago. What I didn't tell anyone was that the mirror belonged to her, the woman who lived here before me, the one who disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only furniture and personal belongings that the landlord sold with the apartment. I'd bought the place furnished, thinking I was getting a deal. The mirror came with everything else. Her name was written on old mail still scattered in the kitchen drawer. Bills, subscription renewals, dental appointment reminders, normal life interrupted mid-sentence. The detective who handled her case had left his card tucked behind the bathroom cabinet. I found it while searching for the source of a persistent chemical smell that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. When I called him, his voice carried the weight of unsolved puzzles. He agreed to meet me at a coffee shop downtown, bringing with him a manila folder thick with photographs and witness statements. The woman had been a forensic photographer, he told me, specialized in crime scenes. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. She'd been working on a case involving a series of home invasions. Nothing stolen, no violence, just evidence that someone had been inside. Personal items moved slightly, food consumed, beds slept in. The victims all reported the same thing afterward. Mirrors in their homes would fog up at random times, and when they cleared, the reflections looked wrong. Objects appeared that weren't there. Shadows moved independently. The detective spread crime scene photos across the small table between us. Each showed a bathroom mirror, pristine except for a single handprint pressed against the glass from the inside. The prints were too small to belong to any of the homeowners. They belonged to her. I studied the photographs while sipping coffee that had gone cold. In each image, the mirror reflected the bathroom perfectly, but something was missing. The photographer herself. Despite the camera flash, despite the obvious presence of someone taking the picture, no reflection of the photographer appeared in any of the mirrors. That evening, I returned to my apartment with a new understanding of what I was living with. I pulled out the box of her personal effects that the landlord had left in the closet. Inside, rolls of film, camera equipment, and a journal filled with meticulous notes about the break-in cases. Her handwriting was precise, almost architectural in its consistency. The final entry was dated the day before she disappeared. She'd written about discovering something in the mirrors, something that explained the pattern of invasions. But the entry ended mid-sentence, ink trailing off the page as if she'd been interrupted while writing. I developed the film rolls in my makeshift darkroom. The images showed crime scenes I recognized from the detective's folder, but these were different angles, different perspectives. In several shots, I could see into the mirrors clearly, and in each reflection there was someone else present at the scene. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. The figure appeared in every mirror, standing behind where the photographer should have been. Same posture, same tilted head I'd seen in my own recordings. As I studied the images under a magnifying glass, I noticed something that made my hands shake. The figure was wearing clothes identical to what I'd worn the day I recorded my bathroom mirror. I called the detective again. This time he came to my apartment. We stood in the bathroom together, examining the space where the mirror had been. The wall behind showed faint marks where something had been mounted for a long time, but there was more. Scratches in the drywall formed letters, spelled out in desperate fingernail marks, "Not alone." He told me about the final search of the apartment after she disappeared. They'd found her camera set up on a tripod in this very bathroom, focused on the mirror. The memory card contained hundreds of photos, all taken automatically at regular intervals over several days. The sequence showed her reflection gradually fading from the mirror until, in the final images, she wasn't visible at all, just the figure behind her growing clearer with each shot. We found her journal's final pages hidden behind the loose bathroom tile. The complete entry revealed her discovery. The break-ins weren't random. Someone had been using the mirrors as observation points, watching the homeowners through their own reflections. The technology was simple but effective. Specialized glass, two-way mirrors installed in place of the originals. But the journal contained one more revelation that changed everything. The person watching through the mirrors wasn't breaking in from outside. They were already inside, living in the walls, moving through hidden passages between apartments in the building. The same person who'd installed the mirrors throughout the neighborhood. I am still living in this apartment. The detective closed her case as a missing person, likely relocated for her own safety. But I know better. I found the passages she wrote about, the narrow spaces between walls where someone could move unseen throughout the building. I followed them to their source. The building's maintenance room contains a wall of monitors, each connected to mirrors throughout the complex. Some screens show empty rooms. Others show tenants going about their daily routines, unaware they're being watched. and on one monitor I can see my own bathroom, the wall where the mirror used to hang. I understand now why she disappeared. She got too close to the truth, and the watcher couldn't risk exposure. I've been more careful, gathering evidence slowly, documenting everything. But sometimes, when I look at my reflection in other mirrors throughout the apartment, I see that same figure standing behind me. The question that keeps me awake isn't who is watching, or even why. It's simpler and more terrifying. How long have they been there, and how many of us know we're being observed? In a building full of people living their private lives, how do you identify the one person who isn't really living here at all, but simply watching? Last week I received an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a single photograph, my bathroom mirror unbroken, hanging exactly where it used to be. In the reflection I can see myself clearly, but standing behind me is someone else entirely. Someone I recognize from the building's tenant directory. The timestamp on the photograph is from tomorrow. Crime 3, when I came home from work, the apartment looked untouched, doors locked, windows sealed. But in the center of my bed were clothes I hadn't worn in years, a hoodie from high school, jeans I gave away. They were folded neatly like a gift. On top was a single glove, one I'd lost in a laundromat long ago. Nothing else was missing, no signs of forced entry. The police took a report but didn't seem concerned. A week later, the clothes changed again. This time they weren't mine, at least not ones I remembered, but they fit perfectly. Whoever was inside knew my size, my habits, my history. I'm starting to think they know it better than I do. The first thing I did was change all the locks. The locksmith was a quiet man with calloused hands who asked too many questions about why I needed new hardware. When he finished, he handed me 3 sets of keys and told me to keep one hidden somewhere safe. I watched him from my window as he loaded his tools, noting how he glanced back at my building before driving away. His van had no company logo. I started keeping a journal of everything that felt wrong. The way my coffee mug faced a different direction each morning. How my shower curtain hung slightly crooked, though I remembered straightening it the night before. The faint scent of cigarettes in my bathroom, though I'd never smoked. Small things that could be explained away individually but formed a pattern when collected together like evidence in a case file I was building against my own sanity. My neighbor from across the hall mentioned seeing someone on our floor during the day, someone who looked like they belonged but moved with the hesitation of a stranger. She described them as average height, average build, wearing clothes that seemed familiar but she couldn't place where she'd seen them before. When I pressed for more details, she became vague, saying she'd only caught glimpses and couldn't be sure of anything. Her answers felt rehearsed. The second delivery of clothes included a sweater I recognized from college, one I donated years ago along with boxes of other belongings I no longer needed. But this sweater had a small hole near the left elbow that hadn't been there when I gave it away. Someone had worn it, lived in it, maybe even slept in it. The fabric held the ghost of an unfamiliar detergent, something floral and cloying that made my stomach turn. I decided to set up a camera in my bedroom, a small device hidden behind some books on my shelf. For 3 days, nothing happened. Then I found the camera moved, repositioned so it faced the wall instead of the bed. The memory card was gone. In its place was a handwritten note on paper I recognized from my own desk drawer. "We need to talk about what you've forgotten." The handwriting looked like mine, but slightly different, as if someone had practiced copying my style until they almost got it right. The ink was from a pen I kept in my kitchen, one I used for grocery lists and phone messages. I checked the drawer where I stored it and found the pen exactly where I'd left it, but the tip was worn down more than I remembered. My sister called that evening, concerned because she'd received a strange message from my phone number. Someone had texted her asking about our childhood, wanting to know if she remembered the games we used to play and the secrets we used to keep. She read me the messages, and they were filled with details only I would know, yet I had no memory of sending them. When I checked my phone, the conversation wasn't there. I started sleeping on my couch, unable to face my bedroom where strangers' clothes appeared like offerings on an altar I never built. But even there, I felt watched. The building settled around me with creaks and whispers that sounded almost like conversations in rooms I couldn't see. My dreams were filled with the sensation of someone going through my belongings, touching everything I owned with hands that knew where each item belonged. The landlord agreed to let me review the security footage from the building's entrance, but when we sat down to watch it together, entire sections were missing. The gaps always coincided with days when I'd found new clothes or noticed changes in my apartment. He seemed genuinely puzzled, claiming the system had never malfunctioned before. But when he left me alone with the computer, I found deleted files in the recycle bin, fragments of video that showed someone entering the building with a key that worked perfectly in the front door. The figure in the footage was too blurry to identify clearly, but something about their posture reminded me of myself. They moved through the lobby with the confidence of someone who belonged there, someone who knew exactly where they were going. In one fragment, they turned toward the camera for just a moment, and I felt a chill of recognition I couldn't explain. I hired a private investigator, a woman with sharp eyes who listened to my story without judgment. She asked about my past relationships, former roommates, anyone who might have had access to my belongings over the years. As we talked, I realized how many people had moved through my life, how many had keys or knew my routines or had reasons to remember me that I'd forgotten. The list grew longer than I expected. She discovered that several items of my clothing had been sold online by various accounts, all created with temporary email addresses that led nowhere. The photos showed my belongings laid out on beds in rooms I didn't recognize, modeled by people whose faces were always cut off at the edge of the frame. Some items sold for much more than they were worth, as if buyers knew their significance. The investigator also found evidence that someone had been accessing my medical records, employment history, and financial information using login credentials that matched my usual passwords. They'd been building a comprehensive picture of my life, studying me like a subject in an experiment I never agreed to participate in. But the digital footprints were sophisticated, suggesting someone with technical skills I didn't possess. When I confronted my ex-partner about whether they'd kept any of my things after we broke up, they became defensive and claimed they'd thrown everything away immediately. But later that same day, I found a voicemail on my phone from a number I didn't recognize. The voice was distorted, electronically altered, but the message was clear. Ask them about the storage unit they've been paying for. The storage facility was across town in a complex I'd never visited. When I arrived with the investigator, we discovered a unit rented under a name that was an anagram of mine. Inside were boxes upon boxes of my belongings, things I'd lost or donated or thrown away over the course of years. But they weren't just stored randomly. Everything was organized by date, creating a timeline of my life told through discarded objects. Some items had tags with notes about where and when they'd been acquired. Among the boxes, we found journals I'd never written, filled with entries in my handwriting describing thoughts and experiences I'd never had. They read like the observations of someone studying me, learning to think like me, practicing being me until the imitation became perfect. The entries grew more confident over time, eventually becoming indistinguishable from my actual writing style. The most disturbing discovery was a series of photographs showing me in various locations around the city, taken from distances that suggested long-term surveillance. In many of them, I appeared completely unaware of being watched, but in others, I seemed to be looking directly at the camera, even smiling slightly, as if I knew the photographer was there. I have no memory of posing for these pictures. The investigator showed me how to trace the rental agreement for the storage unit, but the paper trail led to a series of fake identities and shell companies that dissolved as soon as we tried to follow them. Whoever was behind this had planned carefully, creating layers of misdirection that would take months to unravel. They'd been watching me long enough to learn not just my habits, but my reactions, my fears, my blind spots. We installed new security measures in my apartment and began documenting everything with timestamps and witnesses. For a few weeks, nothing happened. The clothes stopped appearing. My belongings stayed where I left them. I started to believe the investigation had scared off whoever was responsible. But then I found something that changed everything. Hidden inside the lining of my winter coat was a small device I'd never seen before, something that looked like a combination of recording equipment and tracking technology. It was sophisticated, expensive, the kind of thing that required specialized knowledge to operate. When we had it analyzed, we discovered it had been there for over a year, silently collecting data about my movements, conversations, and habits. But the most unsettling discovery was that the device had been modified with components that weren't commercially available. Someone with significant technical expertise had customized it specifically for long-term covert surveillance. The investigator told me this suggested either law enforcement involvement or someone with access to government-grade equipment. As we dug deeper into the case, I began to remember things I'd forgotten or ignored. How I'd started finding perfect strangers on social media who claimed to know me from places I'd never been. Messages from old friends asking why I'd contacted them when I had no memory of reaching out. Delivery confirmations for packages I'd never ordered, all sent to addresses where I'd lived years earlier. The pattern suggested someone had been impersonating me for much longer than I'd realized, using my identity to maintain relationships and access information I'd never shared willingly. They'd become so skilled at mimicking my communication style that even people who knew me well couldn't tell the difference between my genuine messages and their fabrications. The investigation stalled when we tried to identify who had the resources and motivation to conduct such an elaborate deception. The suspects included former partners, colleagues, family members, and complete strangers who might have become obsessed with me for reasons I couldn't understand. Each lie raised more questions than it answered. But then I found something that made me question everything I thought I knew about the case. Hidden in my own desk drawer, underneath papers I rarely touched, was a receipt for the rental of the storage unit. It was in my handwriting, paid for with my credit card, on a date when I had no memory of being anywhere near that part of town. The investigator looked at me differently after that discovery, asking questions about my mental health, my sleep patterns, whether I'd ever experienced periods of lost time or memory gaps. She suggested I see a doctor, get some tests done, consider the possibility that I might be responsible for things I couldn't remember doing. I sit here now writing this account, trying to piece together a truth that shifts every time I think I've grasped it. The clothes still appear sometimes, folded neatly on my bed like gifts from a version of myself I don't recognize. Maybe I've been talking to myself all along, creating mysteries to solve, because the alternative is accepting that my mind has been playing tricks more elaborate than any stalker could devise. Or maybe someone has been studying me so carefully, learning my patterns so thoroughly, that they've become better at being me than I am. Maybe they know things about my past that I've forgotten, understand aspects of my personality that I've never acknowledged. Maybe they're still out there, watching me write these words, knowing exactly how this story will end even when I don't. The glove that started it all still sits on my dresser, a reminder that someone somewhere knows me better than I know myself. Whether that someone is a stranger or just another version of me, I may never discover. But I've learned to live with uncertainty, to accept that some questions have answers too complex for the person asking them to understand. The investigation continues, but I'm no longer sure what we're investigating or who we're looking for. The only thing I know for certain is that truth isn't always something you can find. Sometimes it's something that finds you, wearing clothes you don't remember owning, speaking in voices that sound exactly like your own. Crime 4, the elevator in my building had always made strange noises, clunks, rattles, and the occasional metal screech. One evening it stopped between floors. I pried open the hatch, expecting wires or a maintenance shaft. Instead, I found a narrow tunnel carved into concrete. It had marks on the walls, scratches, tally marks, some smeared red. I followed it for a few feet until the air changed. The temperature dropped and the stench became unbearable. I turned back only to find the elevator gone. I was sealed in. I found my way out hours later, but the tunnel had shifted. It led into a different part of the building entirely, one I'd never seen before, one that shouldn't exist. I didn't report it immediately. Who would believe me? Instead, I started asking questions. The building manager seemed nervous when I mentioned maintenance issues. His hands fidgeted with his keys and he avoided eye contact. He claimed no construction had ever been done behind the elevator shaft. The blueprints he showed me were clean, standard, but the paper felt too crisp, too new. The building was old, constructed decades ago when regulations were looser. I began researching its history at the local records office. The original permits showed discrepancies. Spaces that existed on early drawings had vanished from later revisions. Room numbers skipped sequences. Floor measurements didn't match between different filing periods. I spoke with longtime residents. An elderly woman who lived on the third floor mentioned strange sounds in the walls during certain seasons. She described scratching, like fingernails on concrete, coming from spaces that should have been empty. Another tenant recalled a family that had lived in a unit that supposedly never existed. They had moved out suddenly, leaving behind furniture and personal belongings that maintenance claimed they never found. The smell from that tunnel haunted me. It wasn't decay exactly, but something organic mixed with industrial chemicals. I recognized it from somewhere, but the memory stayed just out of reach. I started paying attention to similar odors throughout the building. The basement laundry room carried traces of it, so did the stairwell near the back exit. I returned to the elevator shaft during off-peak hours. The tunnel was still there, but its configuration had changed. The scratches on the walls were deeper, more deliberate. I brought a flashlight and ventured further. The passage split into multiple directions, creating a network I hadn't noticed before. Some paths were blocked by debris that looked intentionally placed. Others opened into small chambers carved from the building's foundation. In one of these chambers, I found items that didn't belong to any maintenance operation. Personal effects scattered on the floor, clothing that looked like it had been removed hastily. A wallet with identification documents, but the photo had been carefully cut out. Credit cards with names that didn't match any current or past residents I could verify. The building's employee records were incomplete. Names appeared and disappeared from payroll lists without explanation. Background checks seemed cursory. Several individuals had been hired for maintenance positions despite having no verifiable work history. When I tried to contact them through the information on file, the phone numbers were disconnected, and the addresses led to vacant lots or buildings that had been demolished. I started mapping the tunnel system. It extended beyond our building's footprint, connecting to adjacent structures. Some passages showed signs of recent use, fresh scratches in the concrete, areas where dust had been disturbed. The chemical smell was stronger in certain sections, almost overpowering. One passage led to what appeared to be a storage area. Shelves lined the walls, holding containers with no labels. The contents looked like personal belongings, jewelry, documents, photographs with faces obscured or missing. Everything was organized with unsettling precision. Items were sorted by type and stored in clear plastic bags with handwritten numbers. I photographed everything, but the images came out strangely distorted. The lighting seemed wrong, creating shadows that hadn't been visible to my naked eye. Some photos showed shapes in the background that I hadn't noticed while taking them. When I tried to enhance the images, the distortions became more pronounced rather than clearer. The building management company was a shell corporation. Multiple layers of ownership led to dead ends and dissolved entities. The current managers had been in place for only a few years, despite claiming longer tenure. Their knowledge of the building's history was suspiciously limited for people supposedly responsible for its operation. I discovered that several missing person reports had been filed over the years involving individuals whose last known addresses were in our building or nearby structures. The cases had been closed due to lack of evidence, but the patterns were troubling. People who had lived alone with limited social connections who might not be missed immediately. The police reports I managed to access through public records requests contained inconsistencies, witness statements that contradicted each other, evidence that was collected but never properly processed, investigations that were closed prematurely despite obvious leads that hadn't been pursued. I interviewed family members of some of the missing individuals. They described similar experiences with building management, difficulty accessing personal belongings after their relatives disappeared, conflicting information about lease agreements and security deposits. In several cases, the apartments in question were reportedly claimed and re-rented within days of the disappearance, despite ongoing investigations. The tunnel system seemed to be actively maintained. New sections appeared to have been excavated recently. The tool marks on the walls were consistent with professional excavation equipment, not makeshift digging. Someone with resources and expertise was expanding the network systematically. I began noticing patterns in the building's occupancy. Certain units experienced unusually high turnover rates. Tenants would move in and disappear within months, often leaving behind most of their possessions. The timing coincided with periods when I noticed increased activity in the tunnels. My own apartment started feeling different. Items were moved slightly from where I had left them. The locks on my door showed signs of being picked. I installed a security camera, but the footage was mysteriously corrupted during critical periods. The corruption wasn't random. It occurred specifically during times when I was away from the apartment. I realized I was being watched. The same individuals appeared repeatedly in locations where I was conducting my investigation. They never approached me directly, but their presence felt purposeful. When I tried to photograph them, they would disappear into crowds or around corners with timing that seemed too convenient to be coincidental. The building manager offered to relocate me to a different unit, claiming there were issues with the plumbing in my current apartment. His insistence was unusual, almost desperate. The new unit he suggested was in a section of the building where other tenants had previously disappeared. When I declined, his demeanor changed noticeably. I started sleeping elsewhere, staying with friends or in hotels, but even away from the building, I felt the presence of those same watchers. They had expanded their surveillance beyond the building itself. My investigation had made me a target. The final piece came from an unexpected source. A former maintenance worker reached out to me through a mutual contact. He had quit suddenly several months earlier and had been too frightened to speak until now. He described being asked to dispose of items from the tunnel system, personal belongings that had no explanation for being there. He was told they were abandoned property, but some items were clearly valuable and would never have been left behind voluntarily. He had been instructed to incinerate everything in the building's furnace, but he had kept some items, hoping to eventually return them to their rightful owners. When he tried to research the owners, he discovered that many of them were people who had been reported missing. The worker had documented serial numbers from electronics and jewelry. When cross-referenced with police reports, they matched items belonging to several missing individuals. The building management had been systematically collecting and disposing of evidence. But when I tried to contact the worker again, his phone was disconnected. The mutual contact who had introduced us claimed to have no knowledge of our conversation. It was as if he had never existed. I realized that my investigation had led me too close to something that powerful people wanted to remain hidden. The tunnel system was not just a hiding place, it was part of an organized operation. The building was being used as a hunting ground, and I had stumbled into the middle of it. The authorities I had contacted seemed uninterested in pursuing the evidence I had gathered. My reports were filed but never followed up on. The investigators I spoke with asked questions that suggested they already knew more than they were admitting. Their responses felt scripted, designed to discourage further inquiry. I understand now that I am not the first person to discover the truth about this building. Others have stumbled onto the same evidence and faced the same obstacles. Some have disappeared entirely. Others have been discredited or intimidated into silence. The tunnel system continues to expand. New sections appear regularly, and the organization behind it grows bolder. They know that even if someone discovers their operation, the evidence can be made to disappear. Witnesses can be silenced. Records can be altered or destroyed. I still live in the building, but I am no longer investigating. The watchers have made it clear that my safety depends on my silence. I go about my daily routine, pretending I never found the tunnel behind the elevator wall, but I know it's still there, and I know what it represents. The building around me is not just a place where people live. It's a carefully constructed trap designed to prey on those who won't be missed. The missing person reports will continue to be filed and ignored. The evidence will continue to be destroyed. And somewhere in those tunnels, the truth about what happened to all those people remains buried in the dark. Crime 5, living alone has its comforts until things go out of place. One morning I noticed my toothbrush was damp, not just used wet freshly so. I hadn't touched it. I convinced myself I must have forgotten. But it happened again and again. I set up a camera facing the bathroom. What I caught wasn't someone breaking in, it was someone already inside. They emerged from behind the wall panel under the sink, brushed their teeth with my brush, then crawled back into the shadows. Calm. Casual, like it was their home, I sealed the walls shut. The next day the panel was open, my toothbrush was wet, and the camera was gone. The taste of mint lingered in the air when I woke up that first morning. Strange, considering I hadn't brushed my teeth yet. The bathroom felt different too, warmer than usual, as if someone had been breathing in that small space for hours. I picked up my toothbrush and felt the dampness between my fingers. Cold water droplets still clung to the bristles. I stood there staring at my reflection, trying to remember if I'd gotten up during the night. Had I sleepwalked? The thought unsettled me more than I cared to admit. I'd lived in this apartment for 3 years, and nothing like this had ever happened. The second occurrence made my skin crawl. Same dampness, same faint mint scent, same inexplicable warmth in the bathroom. This time I noticed something else, a single strand of hair caught in the drain, dark brown, longer than mine. I pulled it out with tweezers, holding it up to the light. The texture was coarser than my own hair, and there was something about its color that seemed familiar, though I couldn't place where I'd seen it before. I began documenting everything. A small notebook by my bedside became my record of these intrusions. Each morning I'd check the toothbrush, note its condition, examine the bathroom for any other signs. The pattern was irregular but persistent. Some mornings brought nothing unusual. Others left me questioning my own sanity. The third week brought a new discovery. Water spots on the mirror, arranged in a pattern that suggested someone had been leaning close, breathing against the glass. The condensation had dried into ghostly fingerprints, too large to be mine, too deliberate to be accidental. I photographed them with my phone, studying the whorls and ridges until my eyes burned. That's when I decided to install the camera, a small, discreet model that could record continuously, hidden behind a decorative plant on the shelf across from the bathroom. The salesperson assured me it could capture clear footage even in low-light conditions. I felt both foolish and terrified as I set it up, wondering if I was documenting my own mental breakdown or someone else's crime. For 3 nights, nothing happened. The toothbrush remained dry, the mirror clean, the air holding only the familiar scents of soap and shampoo. I began to relax, convincing myself that my vigilance had scared away whatever had been disturbing my peace. Perhaps it had been my imagination all along. The 4th night changed everything. I woke to the soft sound of water running. Not the aggressive flow of a faucet fully opened, but the gentle trickle of someone trying to be quiet. My heart hammered against my ribs as I lay perfectly still, straining to hear more. The sound stopped. Then came something worse, the deliberate, measured scraping of teeth being cleaned. I wanted to move to confront whatever was in my bathroom, but my body refused to obey. Fear had turned my muscles to stone, my breath to shallow gasps that I was certain could be heard throughout the apartment. The brushing continued for what felt like an eternity, accompanied by the occasional soft spit into the sink. When silence finally returned, I waited. The apartment felt different again, as if the air itself had been disturbed and was slowly settling back into place. I counted my heartbeats until dawn, then crept to the bathroom. The toothbrush was soaked, and this time there was no denying the evidence scattered around the sink. Tiny droplets of water, a smear of toothpaste on the faucet, and that same coarse hair tangled around the drain. The camera footage revealed everything and nothing. I watched myself sleep peacefully as a shadow moved through my apartment with the confidence of someone who belonged there. The figure was methodical, careful, almost respectful of my space except for the single violation of my toothbrush. They knew where everything was kept, moving without hesitation to the bathroom cabinet, retrieving toothpaste, using my brush with an intimacy that made my stomach turn. But the most disturbing part came when they finished. Instead of leaving through a door or window, they approached the panel beneath the bathroom sink, a maintenance access I'd never paid attention to, and simply disappeared behind it. The wall swallowed them completely, as if they'd never existed at all. I examined that panel with new eyes. The screws were loose, worn smooth by repeated handling. Behind it lay a narrow space between walls, part of the building's old infrastructure that had been sealed off decades ago. Someone had been living in the bones of my building, emerging only when they needed something from the world above. The police report I filed felt surreal to write. How do you explain that someone is living in your walls, using your toothbrush, sharing your most private spaces? The officer who took my statement was professional but skeptical. Without evidence of theft or damage, there was little they could do. They suggested changing my locks and installing better security, advice that felt pointless when the intruder was already inside. I sealed the panel with construction adhesive and heavy-duty screws. The work took most of an afternoon, and I felt satisfied as I cleaned up the tools and swept away the debris. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks, confident that I'd solved my problem. The next morning, the panel hung open like a mouth. My toothbrush dripped with fresh water, and the camera I'd repositioned to watch the sealed entrance was gone. In its place, someone had left a single item on the bathroom counter, a photograph. It showed me sleeping, taken from the foot of my bed. The angle suggested it had been shot from inside my own room, sometime during one of those nights when I'd convinced myself I was safe. On the back, written in careful handwriting, were the words, "We all need to be clean." I moved out that week, abandoning my lease and most of my belongings. But sometimes, in my new apartment, I wake up to the taste of mint in the air. Sometimes my toothbrush feels just slightly too warm when I reach for it in the morning. And sometimes, late at night, I hear the soft sound of water running somewhere behind my new walls. The police never found anyone in the old building's infrastructure. The new tenants report no unusual activity. The maintenance company insists that the spaces between walls are too narrow for human habitation, despite the evidence I provided. My case file was quietly closed, marked as resolved through the tenant's relocation. But I know the truth. Someone is still out there, still moving through the hidden spaces of buildings, still emerging in the darkness to share in the small intimacies of strangers' lives. They're patient, careful, and they understand that the most disturbing violations are often the smallest ones. A wet toothbrush, a warm bathroom, the knowledge that you're never really alone, even when you think you are. I've stopped trying to convince anyone else. Instead, I check my toothbrush every morning, document every anomaly, and try to sleep despite the certainty that somewhere, in some wall, someone is waiting for the perfect moment to remind me that privacy is just an illusion we tell ourselves in the dark. Crime 6, I live in a top-floor unit, no neighbors above me, just the roof. So when I heard screaming, I assumed it came from the street. But it didn't fade with distance. It grew louder, more frantic. I ran upstairs to check the attic access. There were scratch marks on the ceiling panel, like something trying to break through from inside. I called the landlord, who swore no one lived up there. We opened it together. The space was empty, dust, webs, and a few discarded food wrappers. But in the far corner there was a message scratched into the wood, "Still here." That night the screaming came back. This time it was whispering my name. The landlord left me his card that first day, his fingers shaking as he handed it over. He kept glancing at the ceiling, at the scratches we'd both seen. The marks were too deliberate, too purposeful to be accidental. Someone had been up there, desperate to get out, or desperate to get in. I spent the next morning calling the previous tenants. The rental office was reluctant to share information, but I pressed. The woman on the phone grew quiet when I mentioned the attic. She transferred me twice before someone finally gave me a number. The previous tenant answered after 7 rings. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying. She asked if I'd heard anything yet. When I described the screaming, she went silent. Then she told me about the scratches, about finding food wrappers, about the message in the corner. She'd seen it all before. She'd left after 3 months. The tenant before her had lasted 2 weeks. I started documenting everything. The sounds came at different intervals, but always when I was alone. The scratching grew more aggressive, and I found fresh marks appearing on my ceiling panels. Someone was moving through the space between floors, but the landlord insisted it was impossible. The building plans showed no crawl space, no access between units. I recorded the sounds on my phone. The audio came back distorted, filled with static that formed patterns. When I played it back slowly, I could make out words beneath the screaming. "Help me, don't leave, still here." The building superintendent agreed to meet me after I showed him the recordings. He was an older man with calloused hands and tired eyes. He'd worked there for 15 years, he said, and he'd heard stories. Tenants who complained about sounds, scratches, messages. He told me about the renovation work done 3 years ago. They'd sealed off sections of the building, created new walls, new ceiling configurations. But the work had been rushed, he said. Corners were cut, spaces were left unfinished. I asked him if anyone had gone missing during the renovation. He looked away, his fingers drumming against his coffee cup. There had been a worker, he finally admitted. A young woman who'd been part of the construction crew. She'd stopped showing up one day. Her supervisor assumed she'd quit, but her tools were still in the building. Her lunch was still in the break room. The police had been called, but without evidence of foul play, they'd classified it as a missing person case. The supervisor had moved on to other projects. The crew had dispersed. The case went cold. I obtained copies of the police reports. The missing woman's name had been redacted, but the details were there. She'd been working on ceiling installations. Her last known location was the top floor of my building. The report mentioned that she complained to her supervisor about strange sounds in the walls, about feeling watched while she worked. Her personal effects had been found in the building's storage room. A jacket, work gloves, and a small notebook filled with observations about the construction site. The entries grew increasingly concerned as the days progressed. She'd noted sounds that didn't match the building's normal settling. Scratches appearing overnight in areas she'd just finished. The feeling that someone was following her through the building. The last entry was a single line. They sealed me in. I confronted the landlord with the police reports. He'd known about the missing worker, he admitted. The construction company had paid him to keep quiet, to avoid negative publicity that might affect rentals. The building had been completed and occupied while the investigation was still open. But he swore the woman wasn't still in the building. The police had searched everything. The construction crew had checked every space. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to survive. I hired a contractor to examine the ceiling structure. He found inconsistencies in the building plans, spaces that shouldn't exist according to the blueprints. Behind my bedroom wall, he discovered a narrow cavity that ran the length of the building. It was barely wide enough for a person, but it connected to other hidden spaces throughout the structure. Inside the cavity, we found evidence of recent habitation. Water bottles, food containers, clothing, and scratched into the wall dozens of messages, the same handwriting, growing more desperate over what appeared to be months. Can't get out, they don't know I'm here, getting weaker, help me, still here. The contractor called the police. They searched the entire building, checking every unit, every hidden space we discovered. They found more evidence of someone living in the walls, fresh waste, recent food containers, clothing that hadn't yet deteriorated. But they found no one. The detective assigned to the case was skeptical of my story until I played the recordings. She'd worked missing persons cases before, she said. Sometimes people disappeared into places no one thought to look. Sometimes they survived in conditions that seemed impossible. She reopened the investigation into the missing construction worker. The case file had been thin, she admitted. The original detective had assumed the woman had simply left town. It happened often with transient workers. But the evidence in my walls suggested someone had been living there for years. Someone who knew the building's layout intimately. Someone who'd been trapped or chosen to hide. The investigation stalled when DNA tests came back inconclusive. The materials in the wall spaces were too degraded, too contaminated to provide clear results. The handwriting analysis was similarly inconclusive. Without a body, without a witness, there was no case to prosecute. I moved out of the apartment, but I kept in touch with the detective. She told me the sounds had stopped after the police search. New tenants moved in without incident. The building was quiet. But sometimes, late at night, she admitted she wondered if we'd found everything, if we'd searched every hidden space, if someone was still out there, still moving through walls we hadn't discovered. I think about that worker, about those final months trapped in spaces too small to stand up in, surviving on whatever she could find. I think about the desperation that would drive someone to scratch messages into walls, hoping someone would eventually find them. The building still operates. The landlord never disclosed the investigation to new tenants. The construction company settled with the missing woman's family out of court, no admission of wrongdoing. But I know someone was in those walls, someone who'd been forgotten, abandoned, left to survive in spaces that officially didn't exist. Someone who'd spent years trying to get someone's attention, anyone's attention. The case remains open but inactive. The detective retired. The evidence was filed away. I still have the recordings on my phone. Sometimes I play them back, listening for clues I might have missed. The voice beneath the static is definitely female, definitely desperate, but it's impossible to know if it belonged to the missing construction worker or someone else entirely. Someone who might still be out there. Still here. Crime 7, at first I thought it was a stray cat or maybe a fox. Small bones, rabbits, maybe birds left neatly on my front step, then it escalated. The bones were arranged in patterns, circles, arrows pointing at my door, symbols I didn't recognize. I checked my security camera and found nothing, just blank footage during the nights they appeared. One morning I found a fresh set of bones arranged in a human outline, with a clump of my hair in the center. I don't know who's doing this or what it means, but something tells me it's a message, and I'm the only one it's for. The smell hit me first that morning, metallic, sharp, cutting through the usual dampness of dawn. I'd grown accustomed to finding things on my porch, but this was different. The bones were still warm, still carrying the scent of something that had been alive not long ago. My fingers traced the air above them, afraid to touch, afraid to disturb whatever ritual someone had performed while I slept. I'd been documenting everything for weeks. Photographs, measurements, notes about the weather and the positioning. The patterns were becoming more complex, more deliberate. What started as random scatterings had evolved into intricate geometries that seemed to follow some hidden logic I couldn't decipher. The bones themselves told stories, some gnawed clean, others bearing marks that didn't look like animal teeth. My neighbor mentioned seeing a figure in my yard one evening, but when I pressed for details, her description shifted. Sometimes tall, sometimes short, sometimes walking, sometimes crouched. The only consistent detail was the careful, methodical movement, like someone following a script they'd memorized perfectly. The security footage troubled me most. The camera worked perfectly during the day, recording delivery trucks and passing joggers with crystal clarity. But during the hours when the bones appeared, the feed showed only static, or worse, my porch empty and undisturbed, as if nothing had happened at all. The timestamp continued normally, but the image froze or pixelated exactly when it should have captured the perpetrator. I started sleeping lighter, listening for footsteps on the wooden boards outside. The house settled differently now, every creak and whisper amplified. I found myself checking the locks multiple times before bed, running my palm along the cold metal of the deadbolt until my skin grew numb from the repetition. The breakthrough came when I discovered the journal, hidden behind a loose board in my basement, wrapped in plastic that reeked of soil and something else I couldn't name. The handwriting was familiar, though I couldn't place it immediately. The entries detailed months of observation, my routines, my visitors, the exact times I turned off my lights each evening. Someone had been studying me with scientific precision. The journal described rituals, symbols, meanings behind each bone arrangement. It spoke of messages being sent, of ancient practices adapted for modern communication. The writer believed they were protecting me from something, or perhaps preparing me for something that was coming. The language grew more erratic toward the recent entries, the handwriting shifting between careful precision and frantic scrawling. One entry made my blood freeze. It described taking a clump of my hair from the salon where I'd gotten a haircut weeks ago. The writer had followed me there, waited for the right moment, collected what they needed for their ritual. They'd been that close, that calculated in their surveillance. I recognized the handwriting then. It belonged to someone who'd installed my security system months ago, someone who'd had access to my house, my routines, my vulnerabilities. Someone who understood exactly how to disable the cameras when needed, how to move through my property without triggering motion sensors. The final entry was dated the previous evening. It mentioned a culmination, a final message that would make everything clear. It spoke of a gift that would arrive with the sunrise, something that would test my understanding of their devotion. I called the police, but explaining the situation felt impossible. Bones on a porch, a mysterious journal, disabled security footage. It sounded like the paranoid rambling of someone losing grip on reality. The officer who came took notes politely, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. He promised to increase patrols in the area and suggested I might want to consider staying with family for a few days. That evening I sat in my living room with all the lights on, the journal open beside me, trying to decode the final entries. The writer had included drawings, maps of my property, detailed sketches of bone arrangements, and something else. Blueprints of my house, including rooms I'd never shown anyone, spaces only someone with access to building records could know about. The realization crept over me slowly, like ice water filling my veins. The security installer had never left. Somewhere in my house, in spaces I didn't know existed, someone had been living parallel to my life, watching, waiting, preparing their elaborate messages while I slept above them, unaware. I heard the first footstep around midnight, not outside on the porch, but inside, moving through walls I'd thought were solid. The sound was deliberate, unhurried, as if whoever was making it wanted me to know they were there. I clutched the journal, my hands trembling as I tried to find some explanation, some final piece that would make sense of everything. The bones had never been messages for me. They were markers, indicators of time passing, counting down to this moment when the real communication would begin. Someone had been preparing me, conditioning me to accept their presence, their intrusion into my life. The patterns, the escalation, the careful documentation, it was all designed to bring me to this point of understanding. But understanding what, as I sit here now, listening to the methodical footsteps moving through my walls, I realize that some questions don't have answers I'm ready to accept. The journal ends with a promise. When the final message is delivered, everything will become clear. I can only hope that clarity doesn't come at a price I'm not prepared to pay. The footsteps have stopped, the house has fallen silent, and I'm still waiting for that final message, wondering if I'll recognize it when it comes, or if I've been reading it wrong all along. Crime 8, I received a notice about an overdue payment for a storage unit I never rented. The facility was nearby, so I went to dispute it. The manager insisted I'd signed for it. My ID, my address, everything matched. He gave me the key. Inside were boxes full of things I recognized, photos I'd thrown away, clothes I donated, even a childhood toy I swore I'd lost. Then I found the documents, handwritten journals in my handwriting detailing events I have no memory of. Crimes. Descriptions of victims, locations, and at the bottom of each page, you promise not to forget. The smell hit me first when I opened that metal door. Stale air mixed with something else, something familiar yet wrong, like old fabric softener clinging to clothes that had been packed away too long. The fluorescent light above flickered as I stepped inside, casting uneven shadows across cardboard boxes stacked against the walls. My hands shook as I lifted the first box. The weight felt right, like muscle memory guiding my movements. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper that crinkled too loudly in the silence, were photographs, not just any photographs, pictures of me at my graduation, at family dinners, on vacation. But these weren't copies I'd kept. These were the originals I'd deliberately destroyed after my divorce, the ones I'd torn up and thrown in the garbage because looking at them hurt too much. Yet here they were, perfectly preserved, arranged in chronological order, with a care that made my skin crawl. The second box contained clothes, a red sweater I'd donated to charity, a pair of boots I'd given to my sister, a jacket I'd thrown away because it reminded me of someone I wanted to forget. Each item folded with precision, smelling faintly of the lavender sachets I'd once used in my closet. Someone had been watching me, collecting pieces of my discarded life like souvenirs. But it was the third box that made me sink to my knees on the cold concrete floor. Inside was my childhood teddy bear, the one with the missing eye and the torn ear that I'd carried everywhere until I was 10. I remembered the exact moment I'd lost it during a family move. My mother had searched every box, every corner of the old house, but it was gone. I'd cried for weeks. Now it sat in my hands, soft and worn, smelling like the fabric softener from my childhood home. Someone had found it. Someone had kept it. Someone had been collecting my life piece by piece for longer than I could comprehend. The journals were at the bottom of the box, wrapped in a plastic bag that crinkled as I opened it. 3 leather-bound notebooks, their pages yellowed at the edges. The handwriting on the covers was unmistakably mine, though I couldn't remember forming those letters. My name, my address, dates spanning the past 5 years. I opened the first journal with trembling fingers. The entries began normally enough. Daily observations, grocery lists, appointments, but as I read deeper, the content shifted. Descriptions of people I'd never met or couldn't remember meeting. A woman who worked at the coffee shop noted down to her schedule, her car, her route home. A man who jogged past my street every morning, his habits catalogued with disturbing precision. Then came the locations. Detailed maps of neighborhoods I'd never visited or thought I'd never visited. Street names, building layouts, entry points marked with careful annotations. Times when certain areas would be empty, when security cameras had blind spots, when nobody would be watching. And the victims. Each description was clinical, methodical. Physical characteristics, daily routines, vulnerabilities, written in my handwriting with a detachment that made my stomach turn. These weren't fantasies or fiction. They read like case files, like preparation for something unthinkable. The worst part was how accurate my handwriting was, not just similar, but perfect. Every loop, every slant, every pressure point exactly as I would write. I grabbed a pen from my purse and tried to replicate what I saw on the page. The match was flawless. At the bottom of each entry in the same careful script were those 4 words, "You promised not to forget." I flipped through page after page, finding crimes described in detail. Break-ins where nothing was stolen but personal items were moved. Cars vandalized in ways that seemed random but followed patterns only I would notice. People followed, photographed, studied like specimens. One entry described watching someone through their kitchen window while they made dinner. The handwriting noted how they left their back door unlocked, how their dog didn't bark at familiar sounds, how they always turned off the lights at the same time each night. Reading it felt like watching someone else's nightmare, except the observer was me. Another entry detailed following someone to their workplace, learning their schedule, noting when they stayed late and when the building was empty. The writing described the sound of their footsteps in the parking garage, the way they fumbled with their keys when they were nervous, the exact spot where the security lights didn't reach. I found receipts tucked between the pages. Gas stations, restaurants, hotels in places I'd never been, or places I couldn't remember being. The dates matched the journal entries perfectly. Credit card receipts with my signature, purchases I couldn't recall making. There were photographs too, candid shots of strangers going about their daily lives, unaware they were being watched. Some were taken from a distance, others uncomfortably close. In the margins, my handwriting noted details about these people, their names, their addresses, their fears. But what terrified me most was finding photographs of myself in situations I couldn't remember. Me sitting in a car outside someone's house, me walking through neighborhoods at night, me standing in the shadows of a parking lot watching. In every photo I looked focused, purposeful, like someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The final journal was different. The entries were shorter, more urgent. The handwriting looked rushed, desperate. Pages described close calls, near misses, moments when I'd almost been caught doing things I couldn't remember doing. There were apologies written to people I'd never met, promises to stop behaviors I couldn't recall starting. And throughout it all, that recurring phrase, "You promised not to forget." I sat in that storage unit for what felt like hours, surrounded by evidence of a life I didn't remember living. The fluorescent light above continued its erratic flickering, creating a strobe effect that made everything feel surreal. The smell of old fabric softener mixed with something else now, something that reminded me of fear and regret. When I finally left, I didn't take anything with me. I couldn't. The weight of those boxes, those journals, those photographs felt too heavy to carry. Instead, I locked the unit back up and walked to my car on unsteady legs. The drive home passed in a blur. I kept checking my rearview mirror, not sure what I was looking for, but unable to shake the feeling that I was being watched. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed things I'd never paid attention to before. How my house was positioned on the street, how the windows faced other homes, how easy it would be for someone to observe the daily rhythms of my neighborhood. Inside, I went straight to my desk and pulled out a pen. With shaking hands, I wrote my name on a piece of paper. Then I wrote it again and again. Each time, the handwriting was identical to what I'd seen in those journals, not similar, identical. I searched my house for anything else that might be missing, any other gaps in my possessions that I'd attributed to normal loss or forgetfulness. In the back of my closet, I found empty hangers where clothes used to hang. In my photo albums, I discovered gaps where pictures had been carefully removed. Even my medicine cabinet seemed different, like someone had reorganized it according to a system I didn't recognize. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to remember what I'd done during the periods covered by those journal entries. Some of the dates corresponded to times when I'd felt unusually tired, when I'd woken up with no memory of the previous evening. Times when I'd found dirt under my fingernails or mud on my shoes that I couldn't explain. I'd attributed these things to stress, to the medication I'd been taking after my divorce, to the general fog that grief can create around daily life. But now those forgotten hours felt ominous, like missing pieces of a puzzle I was afraid to complete. The storage unit key sat on my nightstand, catching the light from the street lamp outside my window. I'd kept it despite every instinct telling me to throw it away. Something about those journals, those photographs, those carefully preserved pieces of my discarded life felt important in a way I couldn't understand. Over the following days, I found myself driving past the storage facility without meaning to. I'd leave for work and end up in the parking lot, staring at the building, key in hand. Each time, I'd convince myself to go home without going inside, but the pull was getting stronger. The truth was I needed to know, not just what was in those boxes, but why someone had collected those things, why they'd preserved pieces of my life I'd tried to forget. And why, despite the fear that gripped me every time I thought about those journals, part of me felt grateful that someone had remembered what I'd chosen to forget. The handwriting was mine, the receipts were signed by me, the photographs showed me in places I couldn't remember being. But the person described in those pages, the one watching and following and documenting, felt like a stranger wearing my face. Yet every night, as I lay in bed trying to make sense of what I'd found, those 4 words echoed in my mind: "You promised not to forget." And the most terrifying realization of all was that somewhere, buried beneath layers of conscious memory and reasonable doubt, I suspected I knew exactly what that promise meant. I just wasn't ready to remember who I'd made it to, or why keeping it might be the most dangerous thing I'd ever done. Crime 9, the hallway bulb kept flickering, so I unscrewed it to replace it. When I looked closely, I saw dark fluid sloshing inside. I cracked it open and red droplets spilled out. Not paint, not dye, blood. I checked the others, some clear, some full. I reported it to building maintenance, but they didn't follow up. That night, the lights in my apartment dimmed one by one. In the glow of the final bulb, I saw shadows on the wall that didn't match my body. They twisted, slow and deliberate, like they were waiting for me to turn off the last switch. I didn't sleep that first night. Instead, I sat in my kitchen with every light on, staring at the collection of bulbs I'd gathered from around the building. 7 bulbs, 4 contained the same dark liquid. The maintenance supervisor had laughed when I called again, suggesting I'd been watching too many horror movies, but this wasn't fiction. The metallic smell lingered on my fingertips despite washing them repeatedly. The building was old, constructed back when craftsmanship meant something. Thick walls, solid doors, the kind of place where sounds traveled in unexpected ways. I'd lived here for 3 years, always hearing fragments of conversations from units I couldn't identify, footsteps that seemed to come from empty apartments. The woman upstairs who cried every Tuesday but never answered when I knocked. I started mapping the building's electrical system, tracing wires through common areas and noting which fixtures held the contaminated bulbs. They weren't random. Someone had deliberately placed them in specific locations: the main entrance, the laundry room, the basement storage area, and the fire escape landing on the third floor, places where people passed but rarely lingered. The building's history proved more complicated than I'd expected. 3 different owners in the past decade, multiple tenant turnovers, several units that remained consistently vacant despite the housing shortage. When I requested the maintenance logs from the current property management company, they claimed records only went back 18 months. Everything older had been lost in a computer crash. I began interviewing neighbors, starting with casual conversations in the mailroom. The elderly man from the second floor mentioned hearing drilling sounds late at night coming from somewhere in the walls. The young couple near the elevator talked about electrical problems that maintenance never seemed to fix properly. Power outages that affected only certain units. Lights that turned on by themselves. But it was the woman from apartment 4B who provided the first real clue. She'd been here longest, nearly 6 years. She remembered the previous superintendent, a quiet man who worked mostly night shifts. He'd been particular about the lighting, she said, always carrying spare bulbs and testing fixtures that seemed to work fine. He'd left suddenly one winter without notice or forwarding address. I found his employment file in the management office's unsecured filing cabinet. His background check showed a clean record, but the references were curious. 2 were from companies that no longer existed. The third was from a laboratory supply company. When I called them, they confirmed he'd worked there but wouldn't discuss his responsibilities or reasons for leaving. The laboratory connection made sense when I had the blood analyzed. A friend who worked at the hospital ran it through their system unofficially. Human blood type O negative. Fresh enough to suggest recent collection, but old enough to have begun separating. The disturbing part wasn't the blood itself, but the quantity. Each bulb contained approximately 2 ounces. Someone had been collecting blood systematically, storing it in the building's lighting fixtures like some twisted inventory system. I started staying awake during late hours, listening for sounds that didn't belong. The drilling the neighbor mentioned happened sporadically, always between midnight and sunrise. It came from inside the walls, but I couldn't pinpoint the source. I began marking my calendar, tracking patterns. The sounds occurred roughly every 2 weeks, lasting about an hour each time. The breakthrough came when I noticed the electrical meter readings. My unit's power consumption showed unusual spikes that didn't correspond to my actual usage. Someone was drawing electricity from my line, powering something I couldn't see. When I traced the wiring, I found a junction box that shouldn't have existed, hidden behind a false panel in the basement laundry room. Inside the box were switches controlling circuits I'd never seen on any building schematic. Each switch was labeled with apartment numbers, but also with dates. The most recent date was 3 days ago. The corresponding apartment number belonged to a unit that had been empty for months. I climbed to that unit and found the door unlocked. The apartment was furnished, lived in, despite being officially vacant. Fresh food in the refrigerator, clothes in the closets. Prescription bottles on the bathroom counter with names I didn't recognize, but what stopped me cold was the bedroom ceiling fixture. It had been modified, fitted with a small pump system that connected to thin tubing running through the walls. The tubing led to other apartments, creating a network I was only beginning to understand. Each connection terminated at a light fixture. Each fixture could be controlled remotely from that hidden switch box. Someone had turned the building's electrical system into something else entirely. I photographed everything before leaving, but when I returned the next day with a detective friend, the apartment was empty, cleaned out completely as if no one had ever lived there. The ceiling fixture had been replaced with a standard model. The tubing was gone. Even my fingerprints had been wiped away. The detective ran the prescription bottle names through the system. All belonged to former tenants who had moved out unexpectedly. All had been blood donors at various times. All had complained about unusual electrical problems before leaving. But the real revelation came when we checked the building's ownership records more carefully. The shell company that owned it was connected to the laboratory where the former superintendent had worked. The laboratory specialized in biological storage and preservation. They'd been conducting authorized medical research, but several employees had been terminated for unauthorized experiments. We never found the former superintendent, though his bank records showed regular deposits long after he'd supposedly left town. The current management company claimed ignorance about the modified electrical system, but their insurance covered the removal of all fixtures and complete rewiring of the building. I moved out before the work was finished. The new apartment is modern with standard lighting and no history of unusual tenants. But sometimes when I turn off the lights at night, I remember those shadows on my wall, the way they moved independent of my body, the way they seemed to be watching, waiting for something I still don't understand. The blood inside those bulbs belonged to people who thought they were safe in their homes, people who trusted that the fixtures above their heads were just light bulbs, nothing more. I wonder how many other buildings have similar modifications. How many other maintenance workers carry supplies that aren't meant for normal repairs? I still have one of those contaminated bulbs stored in my freezer like evidence that might someday matter. Sometimes I take it out and hold it up to the light, watching the dark fluid shift inside the glass. It reminds me that some discoveries change how you see the world around you. That safety is often just an illusion maintained by not looking too closely at the details. The case was never officially solved. The detective's report was filed and forgotten. The building's new owners installed security cameras and hired a different maintenance company, but they couldn't change what had already happened. Sometimes the most disturbing crimes are the ones that exist in spaces between official recognition and personal knowledge. I drive by the old building occasionally. The lights work properly now, casting steady illumination on sidewalks where people walk without knowing what used to flow through the fixtures above their heads. They trust that light bulbs contain only the elements necessary for illumination, nothing more. But I know better now. I know that trust itself can be modified, collected, and stored for purposes we're not meant to understand. Story 10. In the beginning there was a faint flicker, a mere anomaly in the baby monitor's transmission. The mother brushed it off as a glitch, blaming it on interference. But then the audio crackled and a soft voice whispered, "SHHH, go back to sleep." A shiver ran down her spine, sending chills through her body. Panic set in as she sprinted to her son's room, heart racing in her chest, only to find the crib empty. The window remained shut, the door securely locked. The only unsettling sight was the stuffed rabbit lying on the floor, its glossy black eyes staring up at her, seemingly knowing something she did not. Rebecca's screams echoed through the house until her voice grew hoarse. The neighbors, alarmed by her distress, dialed emergency services. When the authorities arrived, they discovered her huddled on the nursery floor, clutching the stuffed rabbit, a picture of anguish and despair. Samuel, her 4-month-old baby, had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void in their lives. The investigation yielded few clues. No signs of forced entry, no alarms triggered. The baby monitor footage showed nothing amiss except for that eerie voice and static interference. How could someone sneak in, take a child, and disappear without a trace except for a disturbed stuffed animal? Suspicion fell on Rebecca, especially due to her history of postpartum depression and the strained relationship with her husband Daniel, who was away on business during the disappearance. As the community whispered and pointed fingers, a breakthrough emerged. Microscopic fibers on the nursery windowsill, unrelated to the household, hinted at an intruder accessing the room from outside. Security footage from neighbors caught a shadowy figure lurking in the darkness that night. A mysterious boot print in the garden's soil indicated a skilled climber might be involved. The focus shifted from Rebecca to Daniel, who returned home bewildered, his hands bearing unusual calluses from rock climbing, a hobby he had recently taken up. Financial records revealed a troubling pattern. A hefty life insurance policy on Samuel, secret calls to an unknown number, and a hidden second family in a different town. The pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. The baby monitor, hacked and manipulated, led investigators to a basement where Samuel was found, cared for by a woman named Elaine, Daniel's first wife, who had never recovered from a past miscarriage. The trial unveiled the chilling truth. Daniel and Elaine had conspired to kidnap Samuel, using technology to deceive and manipulate. The enhanced audio from the baby monitor exposed their nefarious plan, sealing their fate. Daniel's cough in the background of the recording placed him at the crime scene, contradicting his claims of innocence. The courtroom fell silent as the verdict was read: maximum sentences for kidnapping and conspiracy. Rebecca and Samuel chose to start anew, far from the haunting memories. The case reshaped abduction investigations, prompting a reassessment of nursery security nationwide. As technology advances, so do the risks it poses to the vulnerable. Samuel grew up unaware of his past, shielded from the horrors of that fateful night. Rebecca kept the stuffed rabbit hidden away, a silent witness to the truth captured by the baby monitor, a truth that transcended the darkness and deception, revealing the depths of human betrayal and resilience. Story 11. In the hushed stillness of the night, a phone call like no other pierced through the static and silence. The operator, initially dismissing it as a mere pocket dial, hesitated as a voice emerged from the garbled noise. A woman's urgent whisper crackled through the line, barely audible yet filled with palpable fear. "He's here." And then an eerie silence descended, swallowing the ominous message whole. The mysterious call originated from an abandoned house, a relic frozen in time, its walls holding secrets long forgotten. Detective Morgan Reed found herself drawn to the enigma of the call, replaying it over and over, each time sending shivers down her spine. The house, once belonging to the Sullivan family, stood as a ghostly testament to a tragic past, its memories etched in the dust-laden corners. As Morgan delved deeper into the enigmatic case, she uncovered unsettling truths that defied logic and reason. The phone, belonging to Catherine Sullivan, a woman deceased for 3 years, had somehow sprung to life, defying the laws of the living and the dead. The very essence of time seemed to warp within the walls of the abandoned house, where the phone had materialized as if conjured by unseen forces. Forensic examinations yielded no concrete answers, leaving more questions in their wake. The whispers of the past echoed through the static-filled call, a spectral voice reaching out from beyond the grave. Catherine's presence lingered, a haunting reminder of unfinished business and unresolved mysteries. As Morgan and her partner, Detective Walsh, navigated the labyrinthine twists of the case, they encountered a chilling revelation that shed light on the darkness shrouding Catherine's final moments. A journal meticulously chronicling a descent into fear and despair unveiled a sinister truth lurking beneath the surface, a truth that implicated those closest to Catherine in a web of deceit and betrayal. Mark Jennings, Catherine's former boyfriend, emerged as a central figure in the unfolding drama, his facade of innocence crumbling under the weight of damning evidence. The journal's entries painted a portrait of manipulation and control, of a love twisted into something sinister and deadly. With each piece of the puzzle falling into place, the truth emerged like a specter from the shadows. Catherine's untimely demise was no mere accident, it was a carefully orchestrated tragedy, a heinous act of violence masked by the guise of fate. Mark's elaborate ruse, his calculated manipulation of truth and perception, unraveled before the eyes of justice. His malevolent intent laid bare for all to see, a chilling reminder of the darkness that dwells within the human heart. As the trial reached its climax, the echoes of Catherine's voice reverberated through the courtroom, a solemn chorus of justice served. Mark's conviction brought a measure of closure to a tale steeped in mystery and melancholy, a story of a woman silenced but never forgotten. And as the abandoned house stood silent, its secrets laid bare, the phone that once whispered of ghostly apparitions now rested in the evidence locker, a silent sentinel to the enduring power of truth and justice. Catherine's voice, once lost in the static of time, now resonated as a beacon of hope and resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest of nights, the light of justice will prevail. Story 12. The parcel arrived mysteriously, a cardboard box without a traceable label or a recognizable sender. Dampened by the morning dew, it seemed out of place on Sarah Miller's porch. Her address was correct, but the name inscribed on the package was unfamiliar Daniel Whitaker. Sarah hesitated, knowing she should have disregarded it, left it untouched where it lay. Yet an insatiable curiosity gripped her, compelling her to unravel the mystery within. With cautious fingers, she peeled away the tape, anticipating mundane contents like books or clothes. Instead, nestled inside was a lone VHS tape, accompanied by a single sticky note that simply read, "Watch alone." Intrigued, Sarah held the black plastic cassette in her hands, sensing an inexplicable weightiness that transcended mere physicality. The tape bore the marks of wear and time, each imperfection a story untold. The handwritten note exuded urgency, the ink pressed forcefully onto the paper. As she stood in her kitchen, the background noise of suburban life enveloped her, a distant dog's bark, the laughter of children, the drone of a lawnmower. Unbeknownst to the world outside, Sarah brought the enigmatic package indoors, placing it on her counter. The name Daniel Whitaker remained a riddle to her, a stranger in an otherwise familiar landscape. The previous occupants of her house, the Johnsons, had long departed, leaving behind no trace of a connection to this mysterious package. Uncertainty and unease mingled within her as she glanced at her old VCR, a relic from another era. Drawn by an inexplicable force, Sarah succumbed to temptation and inserted the tape. Static crackled on the screen, gradually sharpening into focus to reveal a dimly lit room. A man sat before the camera, his features initially obscured by shadows. In a hushed voice, he identified himself as Daniel Whitaker, his demeanor a blend of weariness and determination. He professed his innocence, recounting a tale of framed identity of a crime he did not commit. The room around him spoke of transience, of a life lived on the edge of departure. Detective Eliza Ramirez found herself immersed in a peculiar investigation as identical VHS tapes surfaced, each bearing the desperate plea of Daniel Whitaker. The man had become the prime suspect in the murder of Catherine Walsh, a case seemingly straightforward until the tapes unveiled a web of deceit. Ramirez delved deeper, uncovering a whistleblower's battle against a pharmaceutical giant, PharmaCorp. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Sarah received a second package, this time filled with damning evidence against PharmaCorp. Collaborating with Ramirez and other recipients of the tapes, a trail emerged leading to the truth behind Catherine's murder. Daniel's journal, the incriminating files, and the sinister plans of the corporation's head of security were brought to light. Justice prevailed not through dramatic confrontation, but through the steady accumulation of undeniable proof. Executives were indicted, the truth exposed, and a dangerous drug halted in its tracks. Daniel Whitaker emerged from the shadows, a changed man, vindicated by the unraveling of the conspiracy. In a moment of quiet reflection on Sarah's porch, he revealed the algorithm that had chosen her, the unexpected recipient of a message that altered the course of justice. The VHS tapes, now lodged as evidence, served as a tangible reminder that truth often arrives in inconspicuous packages, awaiting the curious souls willing to peer beyond the surface. Story 13. The river flowed gently that morning, its surface smooth and tranquil. The fisherman's boat glided through the glassy water, the only sound the soft lapping against the wooden hull. As he cast his line, a glint caught his eye near the shore, a suitcase bobbing silently. At first it seemed like a discarded bundle of old clothes, but a pungent odor wafted towards him, thick and suffocating. Chains wrapped around the case, rust creeping along its edges from exposure to the elements. Curiosity piqued, the fisherman waded towards it, the water cool against his legs. When the authorities pried open the suitcase, it revealed a chilling secret, not clothes, but strands of hair, fingers frozen in a grotesque grip. And at the bottom, a cryptic note whispered, "This isn't the first." Detective Sarah Mercer arrived at the scene, her steps measured as she took in the grim tableau before her. The victim, a woman in her mid-30s, lay still, her dark hair clinging to her pale, waterlogged skin. The medical examiner worked meticulously, capturing every detail before the body was carefully removed. What struck Mercer was not just the method of disposal, but the eerie precision with which the victim had been presented: manicured nails, freshly styled hair, adorned in expensive attire. She wasn't just discarded here, Mercer observed, her gaze fixed on the muddy shoreline. She was arranged, deliberately displayed. The victim was soon identified as Catherine Walsh, a successful real estate agent renowned for selling luxurious properties. Divorced and childless, she led a private life in an affluent neighborhood. Colleagues painted a picture of a woman driven by ambition and meticulous in her work. Her disappearance had raised alarms when she missed a crucial showing with potential high-profile clients. She wouldn't have missed that appointment, her assistant insisted during questioning. That sale was her golden ticket. As investigators delved into Walsh's meticulously kept modernist home, they found a place that seemed almost too perfect. Every corner gleamed with precision designer furniture arranged flawlessly, not a speck of dust in sight. In the refrigerator, meals were neatly organized in labeled containers, while her closet boasted an array of clothing meticulously arranged by color. But it was in her home office that a crack in the facade appeared, a slightly open drawer revealing a leather-bound journal. The final entry sent shivers down Mercer's spine. He's watching again. Same car, different plates. Further digging into Walsh's digital footprint unveiled a series of unsettling emails from unknown senders, all bearing the haunting message, "I see your perfection." Each message was sent at precisely the same time on different days. Her online searches hinted at a growing unease, with inquiries about home security systems and personal protection devices. Connecting the dots, Mercer shared her theory with her partner. "Our perpetrator is methodical," she mused. "This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a meticulously planned ritual." A breakthrough emerged from an unlikely source, a local pawnshop owner who recognized Walsh's distinctive emerald necklace among the pawned items. The culprit was identified as Michael Linden, an unassuming maintenance worker with a penchant for blending into the background. Surveillance footage depicted Linden making repeated visits to Walsh's building, sometimes with his maintenance cart, other times without, always during her absences while showing properties. A search of Linden's modest apartment unveiled a chilling reality. Photographs of Walsh and other women adorned his walls, each sharing a striking resemblance, all captured without their knowledge. Some images were crossed out with a stark red marker. Walsh was just one of the victims. Hidden behind a false wall in his closet was a shrine, a macabre collection of personal items from each victim meticulously arranged, along with detailed notes on their daily routines and habits. The interrogation room turned frigid as Linden was brought in for questioning. Despite his calm demeanor and unassuming appearance, his confession sent shivers through the room. They were flawed, he stated flatly. They presented a facade of perfection, but I saw through it. Catherine's desk drawer was always in disarray. She missed a spot when applying her lipstick. Her perfection was a lie. The search for the two other victims mentioned in his note led investigators to remote locations where two more suitcases were recovered, each containing women who bore a striking similarity to Walsh real estate agents who prided themselves on their meticulous attention to detail. During Linden's trial, he sat stoically as the prosecution detailed his meticulous methods. Stalking each woman for months, he meticulously studied their lives, infiltrating their homes to correct what he perceived as imperfections before ending their lives. As the judge handed down a sentence of life without parole, the families of the victims sat in silence, their eyes heavy with grief and disbelief. For Detective Mercer, the case was officially closed, but a haunting question lingered in the stillness of her thoughts. What dark trigger had unleashed Linden's obsession with these seemingly perfect women? What inner flaw was he seeking to erase through his twisted acts? The river continued its unhurried journey downstream, carrying away all traces of the horrors that had unfolded on its banks. But in the quiet of the precinct, on Mercer's desk, lay copies of those chilling notebooks, a stark reminder that behind the facade of normalcy, darkness could lurk, waiting to pounce. And in the shadows of everyday life, the most insidious predators often wore masks of normalcy, their eyes keenly watching for the slightest crack in the veneer. Story 14, the aged apartment exuded a sense of history, its walls holding secrets whispered through time. The heating system moaned, the pipes clinked in a rhythmic lullaby. It was all part of its ancient charm, or so she reassured herself, until that moment of revelation. A voice, barely there yet unmistakable, drifted through the vents like a ghostly echo. It wasn't the usual chatter of neighbors or the hum of machinery. It was a soft, beckoning whisper, calling her name in the stillness of the night. Intrigued and unnerved, she leaned closer to the cold metal grate, her heart racing in anticipation. A sudden rush of icy air brushed against her cheek, followed by a teasing murmur, "I know you're listening." Detective Morgan Shaw found herself in the heart of the deserted apartment, a silent witness to the enigma that unfolded before her. Her gaze lingered on the rusted vent cover, forcibly removed from its place. The forensics team moved around her with precision, capturing every detail with their cameras. The missing woman, Alina Reeves, had vanished without a trace until a foul odor alerted the building manager to a disturbing discovery. What awaited them inside the ventilation system defied logic. Officer Patel recited his notes, recounting Alina's claims of hearing voices through the vents, dismissed as mere quirks of an old building by the management. Shaw knelt by the vent, tracing the jagged marks etched around its edges. These were not random scratches. They bore the desperation of someone clawing for escape from within. Alina, a beloved kindergarten teacher known for her nurturing spirit and thriving houseplants, had slowly succumbed to paranoia in the days leading to her disappearance. Her sister's trembling voice resonated with fear as she revealed Alina's conviction of being watched, spoken to through the very vents that now echoed with silence. Shaw scrutinized the apartment with fresh insight. The meticulously arranged bed, the neglected coffee mug, the chair placed strategically beneath the vent as if waiting for an unseen visitor. Each detail whispered a tale of eerie intimacy. The forensic evidence unveiled unsettling truths. Fibers entwined in the vent grill matched Alina's favorite cardigan. A foreign fingerprint, not belonging to Alina, lingered inside the vent cover. The most chilling revelation came from the audio recordings retrieved from Alina's phone, each playback unveiling a haunting dialogue between her and an unseen presence, a chilling plea for acknowledgement met with whispered promises of proximity. The history of the building unraveled a tapestry of dread. Former tenants fleeing in haste, citing inexplicable noises within the walls, one even falling victim to hallucinations induced by toxic fumes. Harold Weber, the stoic superintendent, harbored a dark secret concealed behind his facade of indifference. His evasive responses hinted at a deeper connection to the mysteries lurking within the building's bones. As the investigation deepened, a concealed passage in Alina's bathroom unveiled a clandestine realm, a maintenance corridor hidden from prying eyes, offering unholy access to the inner workings of the building. Within this clandestine domain lay remnants of a clandestine existence, a makeshift refuge teeming with remnants of life, a voyeuristic sanctuary. Weber's meticulously organized files exposed a sinister obsession. Audio recordings capturing intimate moments, photographs peering through unseen crevices, a digital diary chronicling a twisted infatuation with Alina, each entry a testament to his deranged fixation. The storage unit, a chamber of horrors curated under Weber's guise, held relics of past tenants, a macabre collection of memories frozen in time, a shrine to his perverse conquests. His serene demeanor upon arrest, his cryptic musings about the building's voice, only deepened the chilling enigma. Alina's fate unfolded with tragic clarity. Sedated and coerced, she ventured into the labyrinthine ducts, her sanity eroded by whispered promises of sanctuary. Her final moments a dance of desperation and despair in the bowels of the building betrayed by the very walls that harbored her predator. The trial painted a portrait of a man consumed by his delusions, a puppeteer orchestrating a macabre symphony of whispers and woe. His conviction brought a semblance of closure, yet the building remained a silent witness to his legacy, a realm where echoes of the past mingled with the whispers of the present. The vacant apartment building now stands as a mausoleum of memories, its walls echoing with the ghostly remnants of lives entwined with darkness. Residents come and go, haunted by the spectral whispers that linger in the frigid drafts, the ominous groans of the heating system, the eerie rattle of the pipes. The building holds its secrets close, murmuring tales of the past to those who dare to listen, weaving a tapestry of mystery and melancholy in the hushed embrace of the night. Story 15. In the quiet stillness of the night, a tale unfolds within the walls of a Victorian-era home, shrouded in mystery and intrigue. Michael and Sarah Klein embarked on a journey they never anticipated when they uncovered more than just peeling wallpaper in their new abode. As they delicately peeled back the layers, a hidden narrative began to reveal itself, etched in ink upon the walls. A name, repeated incessantly in a frantic, uneven script: Alina Winters. This name a haunting echo of the past, a whisper carried through time. The enigmatic discovery stirred a deep curiosity within the Kleins, leading them down a winding path of secrets and revelations. The woman who had sold them the house, Margaret Cavendish, bore an uncanny resemblance to the missing Alina Winters from decades ago. A missing persons case, frozen in time, suddenly intertwined with their present reality, blurring the lines between past and present. The charm of the old residence faded as the layers of history peeled away, exposing a tangled web of deceit and tragedy. Sarah's fingers traced the desperate scrawl on the wall, her voice a hushed whisper in the night, questioning the identity of Alina Winters and her connection to their home. The shadows danced in the flickering candlelight, casting an eerie glow upon the walls that held a story untold for so long. Their once beloved home morphed into a labyrinth of unanswered questions, prompting the Kleins to delve deeper into the past. Nights turned into days as they unraveled the threads of a cold case, each revelation drawing them further into the mystery that had lain dormant for years. The echoes of Alina's disappearance reverberated through the halls, a ghostly presence lingering in the air. The retired detective's voice crackled over the phone, recounting the details of a case long forgotten. Alina Winters, a name etched in history, a woman vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void that echoed through time. The walls of the house bore witness to a tragedy long buried, a secret waiting to be unearthed. As the investigation gained momentum, startling truths came to light, shattering the illusion of a peaceful existence. Beneath the floorboards, hidden in the shadows, lay a trove of identities belonging to one woman, Alina Winters, Margaret Cavendish, and the elusive Rebecca Eldridge. A tangled web of personas woven together in a tapestry of deception and madness. The discovery of hair strands and fingerprints unveiled a chilling revelation, exposing the fractured psyche of a woman consumed by her own delusions. Rebecca Eldridge, a name whispered in the dark, a specter haunting the walls of the house, her desperate cries for recognition written in ink that stained the walls like a confession. The excavation of the backyard unearthed long-buried secrets, the past clawing its way to the surface, demanding justice after years of silence. Alina Winters finally found, her story etched in the earth, a tragic end to a life lost to the shadows. Rebecca Eldridge, in her myriad identities, stood at the precipice of truth, teetering between reality and illusion. In a moment of reckoning, the walls themselves whispered the truth of a crime long concealed. Alina's family found closure in the unraveling of the mystery, a bittersweet victory after years of uncertainty. Michael and Sarah, unwitting players in a tale of darkness and deception, found solace in the knowledge that justice, though delayed, had prevailed. The house, once a sanctuary, now stood as a monument to a tragedy long forgotten, its walls bearing witness to the unfathomable depths of human despair. And as the night fell, casting a veil of silence over the world, the story of Alina Winters and Rebecca Eldridge faded into the shadows, a haunting reminder of the fragile line between sanity and madness. Story 16. They stumbled upon it in the attic, concealed beneath a worn-out blanket, a porcelain doll, fragile and ancient, with its deep blue eyes painted wide open and unblinking. It was a sight unfamiliar to both of them. Initially dismissing it as just another neglected relic, they chuckled it off. However, that night, as they settled into bed, an unsettling presence lingered in the air. The stillness seemed to stretch endlessly, and come morning, the doll was no longer in the attic. It now perched ominously at the foot of their bed. Sarah and Michael, a young couple, had acquired the Victorian residence through an auction, captivated by its intricate woodwork and enigmatic allure despite whispers of its troubled past. They were drawn to the stories woven into its very foundation, little knowing that they were soon to become entwined in its dark narrative. Detective Rachel Winters received the call on a crisp autumn morning. The female victim had been discovered in the master bedroom, her body contorted into an unnatural pose, limbs bent at precise angles, eyes frozen wide with terror. The male victim was found in the hallway as though attempting to flee. The scene was pristine, no signs of forced entry, no traces of a struggle beyond the final moments. "The positioning is intentional," Detective Winters murmured, her voice soft as she recorded her observations while crime scene photographers meticulously documented every detail. The female victim appears staged, like a doll plucked from a display case. The investigation commenced with thorough interviews of neighbors. An elderly woman recounted glimpsing a shadow moving behind an upstairs window when the couple should have been away. Another mentioned hearing what seemed like a child's laughter emanating from the vacant house in the dead of night. Each tale added a layer of unease to the mounting case. The forensic team uncovered minuscule fibers throughout the resident's vintage cotton and silk, akin to materials used in antique doll attire. The concentration was highest around the victims' bodies and the attic space. More unsettling was what they didn't find. No fingerprints besides the victims, no DNA from an intruder, no footprints in the dust that defied explanation. "It's as though the perpetrator was never physically present," remarked the chief forensic analyst. Attention shifted to the property's history. Records unveiled a troubling pattern. 3 previous owners over 6 decades had met mysterious ends. Each case remained unresolved, with reports detailing peculiar inconsistencies. One family reported discovering antique toys in freshly cleaned rooms. Another chronicled hearing footsteps when the house should have been empty. Delving deeper, Detective Winters unearthed a newspaper clipping from decades past. A renowned doll maker had once resided in the house with his daughter. The child's demise was shrouded in suspicion, and though the father was questioned, no charges were brought. Before his own tragic end, he crafted one final doll, a flawless replica of his daughter. The inventory list from Sarah and Michael's purchase made no mention of such a doll. As Detective Winters persisted, a common thread emerged among the victims. Each had made alterations to the house, notably to the attic space. Sarah and Michael had initiated renovations the week leading to their demise, intending to transform the attic into a workspace. A breakthrough came when examining aged photographs discovered in a concealed compartment beneath the attic floor. The monochrome images portrayed the doll maker and his creations, with one doll standing out an exact match to the one initially found by Sarah and Michael. The doll appeared to change positions in the photos, almost as if it moved between snapshots taken moments apart. Infrared scans of the walls unveiled a chilling revelation: imperceptible handprints, trailing from the attic to the master bedroom, alongside an enigmatic residue identified as porcelain dust mingled with unidentifiable organic matter. The case took a perplexing turn when Detective Winters interviewed a distant relative of the doll maker, who recounted family lore of unconventional materials and methods. It was whispered that the doll maker had infused his creations with human elements to breathe life into them, drawing on arcane knowledge from his travels abroad. The investigation hit a roadblock after this revelation. No suspects emerged, no conventional rationale aligned with the evidence. The case lingered open but grew cold. Detective Winters requested custody of the doll as evidence, securing it in a locked cabinet at the station. The subsequent morning, officers found her office door ajar, the cabinet vacant. The detective, unharmed yet disoriented, had no recollection of the preceding night. Surveillance footage displayed only static during the crucial hours. The house was auctioned off once more, its turbulent past casting a shadow over its market value despite its architectural grandeur. The new owners encountered an empty attic, save for a neatly folded, tattered blanket. The doll remained elusive, and the tragic fates of Sarah and Michael joined the roster of unsolved cases whispered about in the precinct. Rumors swirled of glimpses of the doll in evidence storage, though inventory audits yielded no confirmation. Detective Winters chose an early retirement, citing personal motives. On her final day, she extracted a solitary item from her personal archives, a photograph of the doll maker and his creations. She sealed it in an envelope marked "Never Open," safeguarding it from prying eyes. The new owners reported tranquility, opting to leave the attic undisturbed. Yet on serene nights, residents spoke of a fleeting shadow behind the attic window and the faint laughter of a child drifting on the air. Story 17. In a quaint little coffee shop that had seen the passage of time like an old friend, one man had made it his sanctuary, his haven of routine. Every day, without fail, he would occupy the same table, order the same black coffee, and envelop himself in the comforting cocoon of silence. The barista recognized his face instantly, yet the man remained a mystery, his name a whisper lost in the steam rising from his cup. Then one day, the man failed to materialize at his usual spot. Concerned regulars exchanged glances, and the staff grew uneasy. It was when the police arrived to investigate his absence that the true enigma began to unfold. Left behind on the vacant table was a wallet, a solitary artifact bearing no name, no address, just a haunting blank space where his identity should have been etched. Detective Sarah Mercer, a seeker of truths in shadows, delved into the mystery that gripped the coffee shop. The man, now labeled as John Doe in the cold case files, had vanished into thin air, leaving behind a trail of questions that twisted like wisps of steam in the air. As Mercer watched the security footage, her fingertips tracing the cold metal table, she saw the impossible unfold before her eyes. John, an unassuming figure in the sea of faces, had entered the coffee shop that fateful morning. He had taken his seat, cradling his black coffee like a secret, lost in his own world of thoughts. The footage captured his every move until a moment of eerie stillness descended. He rose from his chair, left his wallet as an enigmatic token, and strode towards the restroom corridor. And there, in that ordinary hallway, he dissolved into the shadows, never to return. The tech specialist replayed the footage, searching for a glitch, a shred of logic in the inexplicable, but there was none. John Doe had traversed the realms of the mundane and the mysterious, leaving behind a void in the fabric of reality that defied explanation. As Mercer sifted through the remnants of the man's existence spread across her desk, she found only fragments of a life unclaimed. A driver's license with vacant fields, credit cards leading to nowhere, and a single, enigmatic business card bearing a silent phone number. The phone call that followed whispered of secrets untold, of pages turning in the dark. The barista's memories offered little solace, painting a picture of a man who existed on the fringes of perception, a ghostly presence in the bustling cafe. His notebook, a cryptic labyrinth of symbols and sketches, hinted at a mind teetering on the edge of understanding, dancing with forces beyond mortal ken. The investigation led Mercer down winding alleys of uncertainty, where each clue unraveled a tapestry of intrigue. The mirror, an ancient sentinel in the coffee shop, whispered of hidden truths as Mercer gazed into its depths. Behind it, a hidden chamber unveiled a trove of wallets bearing the same spectral visage, a journal echoing with the echoes of a man lost in time. The journal spoke of experiments in temporal alchemy, of windows into other worlds, of a man who sought to breach the boundaries of reality itself. Daniel Weston, the brilliant physicist lost to the sands of time, had etched his legacy in the very walls of the coffee shop, a testament to his quest for the unknown. As Mercer unraveled the threads of Weston's existence, the fabric of reality began to fray. Strange occurrences haunted the coffee shop, shadows moving of their own volition, echoes of a man lost in the corridors of time. And when Margaret Keller, a voice from the past, whispered of quantum mirrors and parallel realities, Mercer knew the truth was stranger than fiction. The mirror shattered a fractured gateway between worlds, as Mercer beheld the impossible, a man watching himself, a loop of existence folding in on itself. And as the final note lay amidst the shattered glass, a warning etched in ghostly script, Mercer knew that some mysteries were not meant to be solved. The case of the man who slipped through the cracks of reality remained a specter in the annals of the unknown. The coffee shop, a silent witness to the enigma, closed its doors, leaving behind whispers of a man who danced on the edges of existence. And as Mercer retreated into the shadows, a notebook clutched in her hands, she knew that some secrets were better left buried in the depths of time. As night descended on the city, casting its cloak of mystery over the sleeping streets, the fragments of a shattered mirror whispered of worlds unseen, of a man who dared to cross the boundaries of reality, and of a detective haunted by the echoes of a man who didn't exist. Story 18: The Mystery of the Haunted House. Hidden away beneath layers of dust and forgotten memories, an old box lay buried in the attic of the house. Decades of neglect had shrouded it in obscurity, a relic of the past waiting to be uncovered. Within its confines, faded Polaroids whispered tales of bygone birthdays and family gatherings, their colors muted by time. Innocent snapshots frozen in moments of joy and laughter, until she stumbled upon the last photograph. Amidst the familiar scenes of celebration, one picture stood out from the rest. It captured her living room, the very essence of her home, yet the family portrayed within was unknown to her. A chill danced down Rebecca's spine as she scrutinized the image, her fingers quivering with an unexplained unease. The figures in the photo, a woman with honey blonde hair, a bespectacled man, and two children beamed at the camera, oblivious to the lurking presence in the shadows behind them. Descending the creaking wooden stairs, Rebecca carried the photograph to her kitchen, where harsh fluorescent light revealed the uncanny resemblance between her abode and the mysterious family's setting. A sense of suffocation enveloped her in the empty house she had recently made her own. Enter Detective Morgan, a seasoned investigator cloaked in a weathered leather jacket that whispered of past investigations. With eyes sharp as flint, he examined the photograph, his gloved hand tracing its edges with practiced precision. Questions hung heavy in the air as he delved into the enigma before them. The trail of the photograph led them through a labyrinth of past occupants: Nelsons, Crawfords, Mornos, all threads in the tapestry of the house's history. A former mail carrier's revelation unveiled the identity of the elusive family in the photo, the Sutherlands, who had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void where their existence once dwelled. Forensic analysis unraveled the secrets of the photograph, pointing to a timer setting and the mysterious figure in the hallway. Tall, male, and cloaked in darkness, his presence defied explanation. Each family that had resided in the house before had met a similar fate, disappearing after precisely 1 year, leaving behind no trace of their departure. As the investigation deepened, a chilling connection emerged. Samuel Whitfield, the elusive architect of the house, whose shadow loomed over the unfolding mystery. Reports of his demise clashed with sightings of his likeness in the photograph, casting a pall of uncertainty over the case. Beneath the house's foundation, a grim discovery awaited the preserved remains of all the missing families, entombed in a macabre gallery of lost souls. Among their possessions lay the camera that had captured their final moments, each photograph a haunting reminder of lives interrupted. Rebecca's fate intertwined with the house's dark past, forcing her into protective custody as the sinister truth unraveled. A cryptic journal found in a hidden crawl space hinted at a malevolent force at work, its final entry foreboding a sinister turn of events. The night breathed whispers of apprehension as Rebecca sought solace in a hotel room, the specter of the unknown looming over her like a shroud. A phone call shattered the silence, the mechanical click of a Polaroid camera echoing through the receiver, a harbinger of unseen threats. The house stood silent, a sentinel of secrets waiting to be unearthed. Samuel Whitfield's enigmatic legacy lingered in the shadows, his presence a phantom haunting those who dared to seek the truth. As new families ventured into its depths, the cycle of mystery and malevolence continued, a chilling reminder of the darkness that dwelled within its walls. And so the tale of the haunted house persisted, its mysteries deepening with each passing day, a testament to the enduring power of the unknown. In the hushed stillness of the night, whispers of the past mingled with the present, weaving a tapestry of intrigue that defied explanation. Story 19, the Polaroid lay in Sarah Winter's trembling hands, a relic of birthdays long past, frozen in time. Faces smiled, candles flickered a scene of ordinary joy. Yet as Sarah sifted through her mother's forgotten memories, she saw it, a shape lurking in the background beyond the group's laughter. A man half-shrouded in darkness, lingering just outside the flickering candlelight. He did not belong to the family. No one recalled his presence, and yet in each photo he drew nearer. Sarah stumbled upon the collection while clearing out her mother's attic following the funeral. A simple cardboard box marked memories, containing a treasure trove of faded photographs capturing cherished moments from her childhood. What should have brought solace instead birthed a creeping dread. In the initial photo, he was a mere whisper, a shadow at the periphery during her 7th birthday celebration. The enigmatic figure loomed by the glass door, his features obscured, a silent observer. In the subsequent photo, taken moments later, he had advanced indoors. By the 3rd frame, he stood behind her uncle, unnoticed by all. Trembling with unease, Sarah phoned her father, questioning the mysterious man haunting the photographs. "Dad, who is this stranger in the background of every picture?" A heavy silence hung in the air before a sharp inhale broke it. What man, only family, should be there? Sending digital copies of the Polaroids to her father, Sarah awaited his response. His voice, usually steady, quivered when he called back. "It can't be. We'd have noticed an outsider." At the precinct, Detective Marcus Reed attentively examined the photos spread across his desk as rain tapped against the windows, casting dancing shadows. His weathered hands traced each image methodically, a furrow forming on his brow. "No one recognizes this individual?" he inquired, a mix of neutrality and intrigue in his tone. "None," Sarah affirmed. The detective leaned in, the chair creaking beneath him. What initially seemed like paranoia now materialized before his eyes. The mysterious figure traversed the party in a deliberate dance, inching closer to the unsuspecting children with each photo until, in the final snapshot, he loomed directly behind young Sarah, a pale hand reaching out just beyond the frame. "The photographer," Reed suggested, skepticism lacing his words. "My mother took these. She set the timer and joined the picture," Sarah explained. Making duplicates and initiating a case file, the detective embarked on a quest to unravel the enigma. Contacting surviving party attendees, he found no recollection of the man, no hired help, no unexpected visitors. The rural property, secluded for privacy, had no room for intruders. Facial recognition technology faltered. The figure remained strategically obscured, as if evading the lens. Yet an air of practiced intention marked his every move. The investigation might have hit a dead end had Sarah not unearthed more photos from other family albums, distinct gatherings, varied years, and the same mysterious presence lurking in the shadows, unnoticed. A specialist enhanced the images, unveiling hidden details beneath the decades-old decay. A scar on the wrist, a unique ring, a reflection in a window offering a glimpse of facial features previously veiled in shadow. A breakthrough came with dental records. The teeth in one enhanced photo matched those of Robert Keller, a maintenance worker linked to unsolved child abductions spanning the region, a dark chapter from decades past, coinciding with the documented gatherings. Keller had been associated with the company that serviced the vacation property hosting Sarah's birthday celebration, holding master keys to multiple rental sites in the vicinity. Sites where families congregated, sites where children vanished. Beneath the concrete foundation of Keller's former residence, authorities unearthed small relics, a hair clip resembling one worn by a missing girl, a toy car belonging to a vanished boy, a bracelet Sarah recognized as her own, thought lost in childhood. Alone in her apartment, surrounded by the haunting photos that unveiled concealed horrors, Sarah awaited the detective's call. He confirmed the identification of remains near one of the vacation properties, a missing child finally found. Gazing at the final birthday photo, the warm candlelight casting a serene glow on her family's faces, Sarah saw a figure lurking behind her younger self, hidden yet undeniably present, watching with a chilling patience. The interconnected threads of unsolved mysteries spanning decades had unraveled. Families received closure, though not the hope for reunion. The shadow in the family photos had stepped into the realm of justice, his long-concealed presence acknowledged after years of veiled existence. Sarah carefully placed the photos back in their box, now evidence of unseen dangers captured in film phantoms moving through celebrations undetected, leaving mere whispers of their passage in the frozen tapestries of time. Story 20. The new homeowners found the old intercom system intriguing, despite its crackling late-night whispers, a quirky relic of the past, long forgotten but rewired nonetheless. One fateful night, curiosity got the best of the husband as he pressed the button, and a chilling whisper crackled through the speaker, asking, "Why did you come back?" Startled, he turned to his wife, whose whispered denial echoed in the dimly lit room. The Victorian manor stood surrounded by ancient oak trees, its weathered facade concealing a modern interior that Daniel and Meredith Parker had fallen in love with. The couple had acquired this property at an oddly reasonable price, with the real estate agent's nervousness during the walkthrough hinting at untold tales. The vintage intercom system, connecting all the rooms, had particularly captivated the history-loving pair. Upon receiving a call about a potential break-in at the manor, Detective Sarah Reeves arrived, the gravel crunching beneath her unmarked vehicle's tires. There was an air of mystery in the dispatcher's voice, suggesting more than a mere intrusion. Daniel, with a pale countenance, led Detective Reeves through the grand foyer, recounting the strange occurrences that had begun with the intercom's static, whispers, then coherent sentences that both he and Meredith had heard. In the living room, Meredith sat tense on an antique sofa, gripping a mug untouched by her trembling hands. Without preamble, she revealed they had found something hidden behind a wall. While expanding the kitchen pantry, Daniel had stumbled upon a small leather-bound journal wrapped in deteriorating plastic. Detective Reeves, gloved, carefully perused the journal's elegant yet frantic entries penned by a leaner, the previous owner, detailing her fears of her husband Vincent's sinister intentions. The investigation unveiled the grim history of Vincent and Alina Blackwood, the house's former owners. Records showed Vincent selling the house after Alina's disappearance, with no trace of her thereafter. Ground-penetrating radar exposed anomalies beneath the garden shed, leading to the discovery of a woman's skeleton with signs of violence. A wedding band inscribed with "To Alina, my eternal love," further confirmed the grim truth. Vincent Blackwood, now elderly and confined to a care facility, confessed to the murder upon facing the evidence. His chilling admission of silencing Alina, who persistently communicated through the intercom, revealed the depths of his deception. The trial swiftly concluded with Vincent pleading guilty to the crime, his calculated actions and decades-long faux-pas laid bare. Daniel and Meredith, unable to bear the house's dark past, sold the property after a solemn garden memorial for Alina. The intercom system, removed by the new owners during renovations, emitted static and whispers during its dismantling, dismissed as mere interference. Detective Reeves revisited the case file, pondering how the house itself had unraveled its secrets across time, leading to Vincent's long-overdue reckoning. Known locally as the house that answered back, the manor's tale lingered in law enforcement circles. Detective Reeves, passing the property on her way home, would slow down at times, listening for whispers in the wind, a silent echo of Alina's long-silenced voice finally heard. Story 21, the aged library stood on the brink of destruction. The workers neared completion when a chance stumble revealed a hidden latch within a bookshelf. With a gentle click, the entire case swung open, unveiling a narrow passage leading to a concealed chamber. The air within was heavy, untouched for decades. No furnishings adorned the space, only a solitary chair at its center, firmly affixed to the floor. And etched repeatedly upon the wall, the haunting words echoed, "I am still here." The construction foreman swiftly radioed for the police. What had begun as a routine demolition swiftly evolved into something far more ominous. Detective Morgan Walsh, a seasoned officer with 2 decades of experience, arrived on the scene. Standing in the doorway, his flashlight pierced the darkness, revealing the unsettling message that adorned the walls. "Secure the scene," Walsh ordered the officers, his voice resonating in the confined room. "No one disturbs anything until forensics arrives." The building's history painted a captivating backdrop. Once privately owned by the Harrington family, esteemed members of the community, the library had been donated to the public following the mysterious disappearance of their daughter, Rebecca. Vanishing during her final year of college, she left behind no trace save for her abandoned car discovered near the woods. Despite exhaustive searches and interviews, the case grew cold. The prevailing belief suggested she had fled to start anew, a notion vehemently refuted by her family, who suspected a darker truth. As forensic experts meticulously combed through the hidden chamber, they uncovered hair and fiber samples embedded in the chair. Traces of blood and skin cells lingered amidst the scratches on the wall beneath layers of dust. Initial tests indicated the biological material belonged to a young female. The chair was designed for restraint, the analyst remarked, gesturing to the bolt holes and aged leather straps still affixed to the arms. Whoever was confined here fought fiercely. Walsh assembled a team to delve into the Harrington family's past. The timing of the library's donation gnawed at him. It coincided closely with Rebecca's disappearance, a peculiar correlation now fraught with significance. Further inquiry unveiled a disturbing revelation. The bookshelf concealing the hidden room had been installed by a contractor exclusively employed by Maxwell Harrington, Rebecca's uncle and the family patriarch. Financial records indicated exorbitant payments to this contractor, far surpassing standard renovation costs. Former library staff expressed shock at the revelation. None had been privy to the hidden space, save for an elderly librarian who recalled Maxwell spending hours alone in that section of the building after hours. She assumed he sought solitude for his reading pursuits. Maxwell insisted that area remain untouched during renovations, she divulged to investigators. He claimed the original woodwork held historical significance and was irreplaceable. The investigation intensified when DNA evidence from the hidden room matched samples from Rebecca's hairbrush recovered from her old bedroom. The timeline grew clearer and more disturbing. Rebecca had not fled, she had been imprisoned behind the bookshelf, potentially by a member of her own family. With a warrant in hand, detectives scoured the Harrington estate. In Maxwell's study, they unearthed a leather-bound journal secreted in a false compartment. Its entries chronicled months of disturbing obsession with his niece. The final entry sent shivers down their spines. She threatened to expose all. I could not allow that. The room will confine her until she comprehends. Locating Maxwell in a coastal retirement community, investigators confronted him. Initially composed, he disavowed knowledge of the hidden room, dismissing it as an architectural quirk. However, when faced with the journal and DNA proof, his fa-de crumbled. She was a threat to all I held dear, he finally confessed, devoid of emotion. Rebecca unearthed evidence of my embezzlement from the family foundation. Our name meant everything, I could not let her tarnish it. Admission painted a gruesome tableau. Maxwell had enticed Rebecca to the library, subdued her, and locked her away in the hidden chamber. His plan was to confine her until she agreed to silence, but a fatal error occurred. During one encounter, Rebecca had attempted escape. In the ensuing struggle, he had taken her life. I panicked, Maxwell confessed on record. I buried her beneath the room's floorboards and sealed it shut. The donation of the building was to ensure that area remained untouched. Ground-penetrating radar confirmed human remains beneath the hidden room's floor. Excavation unveiled Rebecca's skeletal remains, clad in the silver bracelet gifted by her parents for her 20th birthday. The Harrington family witnessed Maxwell's sentencing, solemnly observing as justice was meted out. Rebecca's mother clutched her daughter's recovered bracelet, the sole memento they could lay to rest after years of anguish. The library's demolition halted indefinitely, transforming into a site of remembrance and contemplation. Community members left flowers at the entrance, honoring a life cut tragically short and a truth concealed behind a bookshelf, patiently awaiting discovery. In a poignant twist, it was Rebecca's haunting message, "I am still here," that ensured her eternal memory and the eventual arrival of justice, however belated, into the light. Story 22. The quaint old apartment held onto its secrets, the pipes that groaned in the night, the floorboards that whispered tales of days long gone. But the new tenant, Sarah, sensed an unsettling presence within its walls. It wasn't just the usual settling sounds, it was something more deliberate, more purposeful. The footsteps echoed from above, slow and methodical, despite Sarah residing on the top floor. One fateful night, emboldened by a mix of curiosity and dread, Sarah tentatively tapped the ceiling with a broomstick. The footsteps ceased abruptly, plunging the space into an eerie stillness. Then, a solitary knock reverberated from within the ceiling itself, sending shivers down Sarah's spine. Sarah chose to keep the unnerving incident to herself, attributing it to the quirks of the aging building, or perhaps a stray animal seeking refuge in the attic. Night after night, the rhythmic footsteps persisted, tracing invisible paths above her head in the darkness. Sarah adapted, drowning out the unsettling sounds with blaring television volumes and the solace of headphones at bedtime. Detective Morris was drawn into the enigma surrounding the apartment when a maintenance worker stumbled upon a concealed crawlspace while conducting routine repairs. Removing a section of drywall near Sarah's unit to address a leak, the worker uncovered a narrow passageway that defied the building's blueprints. Within this clandestine space lay a chilling discovery, a makeshift living area adorned with remnants of human presence. Food wrappers, water bottles, a tattered blanket, and a weathered notebook. Alarmed, the building superintendent promptly alerted the authorities. Detective Morris, accompanied by his partner Detective Rivera, arrived at the scene to find the shaken worker muttering about an unseen presence. "Someone dwells within the walls," he repeated in a hushed tone. "Someone has been watching." The notebook divulged meticulous observations of Sarah Coleman's daily life, her routines, her interactions, her very essence captured on paper. The once methodical handwriting devolved into a frenzy of erratic scribbles and cryptic symbols, culminating in a chilling declaration. "The subject refuses to acknowledge my existence. No one ignores me." Forensic teams meticulously combed the hidden passages, unearthing fingerprints that matched no known records. The intricate network of concealed tunnels snaking through the building revealed a disturbing truth: connections to multiple apartments, all converging upon viewing points strategically positioned in only one unit, Sarah Coleman's. Interviews with current residents yielded no anomalies beyond the typical hum of communal living. However, former tenants painted a different picture. 3 predecessors of Sarah recounted sensations of being watched or hearing inexplicable noises, prompting one swift departure after a mere fortnight. Their accounts remained unvoiced, overshadowed by a fear of sounding paranoid. A breakthrough emerged when forensic analysis unveiled minuscule traces of blood in one of the hidden spaces, leading to a DNA match with Martin Weaver, a former resident who had vanished without a trace years earlier. His disappearance had languished as a cold case until now. Martin had resided directly below Sarah's apartment. Revisiting Martin's enigma, Detective Morris unraveled a disquieting pattern. Martin's complaints about disturbances above his unit had led to a confrontation with his upstairs neighbor, an enigmatic recluse named Edward. Following this encounter, Martin vanished into thin air, coinciding with Edward's hasty departure, leaving no forwarding address in his wake. Delving deeper into Edward's past, investigators unearthed a trail of transient residency across several apartment complexes. Each move to a top-floor unit, each departure shrouded in secrecy, hinted at a sinister purpose. A neighbor from Edward's past recounted his fixation on silence and the intensity that cloaked his demeanor. The trail led investigators to a remote cabin nestled within the wilderness, a lair cloaked in shadows and secrets. Photographs of unsuspecting residents adorned the walls, alongside meticulous plans of building structures and detailed journals chronicling the specimens under Edward's watchful eye. A corkboard marked a grim tally of missing persons reports, each linked to Edward's transient path. Behind the cabin, the chilling truth unfurled beneath a moonlit sky. Cadaver dogs guided investigators to freshly disturbed earth, unveiling a series of graves harboring unspeakable horrors. As forensic experts commenced the solemn task of identification, Detective Morris returned to Sarah's abode. Though the hidden passages had been sealed, whispers of unexplained noises lingered among the residents. During the installation of enhanced security measures, a startling discovery emerged: a second notebook concealed in a crevice where wall met ceiling. Its ominous contents hinted at a new hideout, evading the authorities' grasp. The race to locate Sarah intensified, but her apartment lay deserted, a ghostly echo of her existence. A cryptic message etched onto the bathroom mirror revealed a chilling truth: the insidious presence had not departed. The manhunt for Edward, now identified as Edward Mercer, a former construction worker with a penchant for secrecy, continued. Thermal scans of Sarah's building unveiled no remnants of occupancy within the concealed passageways. Sarah Coleman's fate remained a haunting mystery, intertwined with a web of disappearances spanning multiple states. A sobering warning echoed through the corridors of apartment buildings, cautioning against concealed spaces and unauthorized alterations. In the quiet of the night, Detective Morris found himself gazing upward, a silent vigil against the unknown. Who else lingered in the shadows, listening for the faint echoes of footsteps overhead, waiting for a response that never came? Story 23. In the quiet stillness of the night, amidst the gentle patter of rain on the roof, a sense of unease lingered in the air. Rebecca Morgan reluctantly ascended the creaking stairs to the attic, her steps faltering with each creak and groan of the old wooden boards. The storm had revealed a leak in the roof, forcing her to confront the forgotten space filled with shadows and memories long tucked away. Dust danced in the dim light filtering through the small window, casting eerie shapes on the forgotten belongings strewn haphazardly around the attic. Cobwebs clung to forgotten trinkets, veiling them in a ghostly shroud of neglect. And there, in the farthest corner, stood an old dollhouse, its presence sending a shiver down Rebecca's spine. The dollhouse was a miniature replica of a home, its tiny furniture arranged with meticulous care. But as Rebecca peered closer, a sense of dread crept over her. The figures within were not mere dolls, they were intricate hand-carved replicas of her family. Each tiny figure positioned precisely as they sat in the rooms below, frozen in time, except for one herself. The figure meant to be her was standing by the attic door, watching with unblinking eyes. Her trembling hand reached out to touch the dollhouse, tracing the roof where the small wooden figure stood. The discovery sent a chill through her, a primal fear that transcended the physical coldness of the attic. This dollhouse didn't belong here. This wasn't her childhood home, but a temporary refuge her family had recently moved into. The unsettling revelation prompted Rebecca to contact the authorities, seeking answers in the face of inexplicable terror. Law enforcement arrived at the suburban residence, greeted by a family gripped by fear, huddled together in the safety of their living room, refusing to return to the attic. Detective Sarah Harmon, the lead investigator, initially dismissed the family's concerns as a prank or a figment of their imagination, a coping mechanism for adjusting to a new environment. But as she delved deeper into the mystery, the true extent of the chilling discovery began to unravel. The intricate detail of the dollhouse figures captured the essence of each family member with eerie precision: the father's graying temples, the son's favorite hoodie, the mother's gentle birthmark. But what sent shivers down their spines were the unfamiliar fingerprints found on the miniature furniture, fingerprints that did not belong to anyone in the family. Forensic analysis uncovered a web of surveillance cameras hidden within the dollhouse, each connected to a sophisticated recording system concealed beneath the miniature structure. The captured footage revealed a disturbing pattern. The figures mirrored the family's movements not just from that evening, but from various days, suggesting a meticulous observer had been studying them in secret. The investigation took a dark turn when a concealed basement entrance was discovered behind a false wall in the pantry. Inside, evidence of an intruder's presence emerged: a makeshift living space littered with remnants of a clandestine residency. Food wrappers, water bottles, and a sleeping bag hinted at someone living beneath the unsuspecting family for weeks. The absence of forced entry puzzled investigators further, delving into the history of the property and its previous owners. The house had stood vacant for nearly a year before the Morgans arrived, its previous occupants, an elderly couple, having passed away under mysterious circumstances. Their son, Martin Wells, had overseen the estate's sale and the subsequent rental of the property. Interviews with neighbors revealed little except for fleeting glimpses of lights in the vacant house, dismissed as real estate showings. But the truth lay hidden in digital breadcrumbs, leading investigators to a small apartment across town, a place cloaked in shadows and secrets. Within the walls of that apartment, a chilling tableau awaited the walls adorned with photographs of the Morgan family and previous occupants, journals meticulously chronicling their daily routines with unnerving precision. And in a workshop, dozens of unfinished dollhouses stood as a testament to a disturbed mind's obsession. Martin Wells, the orchestrator of this twisted symphony, calmly recounted his motivations during interrogation. His possessive delusion stemmed from a need to control what he had lost, to dominate the lives within the walls that once held his childhood memories. The dollhouses were his way of asserting authority, of playing God over unsuspecting tenants. As the case unfolded, the depth of Wells' obsession emerged, painting a portrait of a man consumed by a need for control and possession. His actions transcended mere voyeurism, delving into the realm of psychological warfare, where lives were manipulated like pawns on a macabre chessboard. The judge's gavel fell with a resounding finality, sentencing Wells to face the consequences of his twisted desires, charges of stalking, invasion of privacy, illegal surveillance, and breaking and entering. But the scars left by his actions ran deep, lingering in the shadows of the Morgan family's shattered sense of security. As they sought solace in a new home far from the haunting memories of the past, Rebecca's words echoed with a haunting truth. The dollhouse wasn't just a plaything. It was a reflection of a shattered reality where the line between observer and observed blurred into a nightmare. And in the darkness of the night, as she checked closets and corners for hidden eyes, Rebecca couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere out there, in another dollhouse, a tiny figure moved, a reminder of a time when their lives were mere playthings in the hands of a disturbed mind. Story 24. The motel stood there, a relic of forgotten times, a place where travelers sought respite for just a fleeting night. The receptionist handed her the key, a glint of mystery flickering in his eyes as he uttered softly, "Remember, steer clear of the final door on the left." Intrigue tugged at her curiosity. That night, amidst the hushed whispers of the hallway's shadows, she halted before that ominous door. The brass handle chilled her palm, and yet, to the naked eye, it appeared no different from its companions until she pressed her ear against the weathered wood. From the other side, a faint breath danced through the cracks. Detective Morgan Reed, weariness enveloping her like a veil, stooped beneath the amber tape marking the entrance to the grim scene. The odor struck her first, a metallic tang, a sour note that bespoke of tragedy. The carpet bore witness to the crimson stain, swallowing the light in its depths. The room told a tale of stark contrasts, a pristine bathroom, an undisturbed bed, and in between, the grim tableau that shattered the tranquility. A young woman lay sprawled on the floor, her golden locks splayed like a halo. Vacant eyes stared at the ceiling, frozen in a silent scream. Reed knelt beside the fallen figure, mindful of the evidence markers dotting the scene like ominous sentinels. "The third one this season," remarked the forensic expert, his tone devoid of emotion as he meticulously captured the scene through his lens. "The same signature as before." Reed nodded in silent acknowledgement, the victim adorned in finery that clashed with the motel's humble setting. A designer handbag lay open, its contents untouched. This was not a crime of opportunity. This was something deeper, something driven by a darker force. The motel's manager lingered by the doorway, his pallor a stark contrast to the dimly lit corridor. She checked in alone, paid in cash. I never imagined, his voice faltered. The maid discovered her during routine cleaning. Reed surveyed the room once more. No signs of forced entry, no defensive wounds on the victim. She had either welcomed her assailant willingly or known them beforehand. Back at the precinct, Reed pinned up photographs on the board, a haunting triptych of faces, each bearing a striking resemblance to the others. The press buzzed with speculations, whispers of a predator on the loose. "The autopsy results are in," announced Detective Hayes, dropping a file on Reed's desk. "Death by manual strangulation. No DNA under the victim's nails, no signs of sexual assault." Reed furrowed her brow. This was not a crime of opportunity. This was personal. Days bled into nights as the investigation deepened. Surveillance footage yielded no breakthroughs. The victim, identified as Elaine Werner, defied easy categorization. A financial analyst with no known enemies, she seemed out of place in the seedy motel. A breakthrough came during an interview with Werner's sister. She mentioned a man from work. The sister divulged, her hands trembling around the steaming cup. "Someone complicated, married, I think." Reed lined in, her gaze intent. "Did she mention a name?" "Just C," the sister whispered. The focus shifted to Werner's workplace. Colleagues painted a picture of a meticulous professional, private in her affairs. Yet a business card hidden in her desk revealed a connection to Charles Emerson, senior vice president. Emerson exuded charm and composure, but a flicker in his gaze betrayed a hidden truth. Forensics linked Emerson to the crime through partial fingerprints on Werner's belongings. A web of deceit unraveled as surveillance footage and DNA evidence pointed to his guilt. In the interrogation room, Emerson's fa-de crumbled. "She threatened to expose our affair," he confessed. The trial ended swiftly. A verdict of life without parole sealed his fate. As he was led away, Reed caught a glimpse of emptiness in his eyes, a void where empathy should have resided. The media dubbed it the door on the left case, while psychologists delved into Emerson's psyche. For Reed, the case lingered like a shadow, a reminder that some secrets, once unearthed, can never be buried again. In the quiet of the evidence locker, 3 identical keys lay dormant, bearing silent witness to the darkness that lurked behind the innocuous door. And as Reed wandered through hotel corridors, she couldn't help but wonder what mysteries lay hidden behind the countless doors that lined her path. Story 25. In the quiet town, there was a house on the outskirts of the woods that nobody talked about. It stood solitary, its windows darkened, its porch worn down by time. No one laid claim to it, and its origins were lost in the whispers of the wind. But one day a group of hikers strayed too close and stumbled upon an unsettling sight, names etched into the wooden walls, carved deep like silent warnings. Among them was a fresh name, unfamiliar to all but one of the hikers. And as the group huddled in the fading light, a trembling voice broke the uneasy silence. "That name, it's mine." When the call came in, it was just another routine report of trespassing. Mason Wright, the lead hiker who discovered his own name etched into the mysterious house, spoke with a sense of unease that caught the attention of the responding officers. What they encountered there defied their expectations and plunged them into a mystery that chilled their bones. As night fell, Detective Sarah Keller arrived at the scene. Her flashlight pierced the darkness, revealing the weathered facade of the house adorned with 27 names, some almost faded into obscurity while others seemed freshly carved. At the bottom of the list was Mason Wright, the cut still raw with sawdust. "I've never been here before," Mason insisted, his breath visible in the cold air. "How could my name be here?" The ensuing investigation sent shivers down the spines of the detective team. Background checks on the names led to a chilling revelation. All of them belonged to individuals who had gone missing while hiking alone over the past 40 years. Some cases had grown cold with time, while others remained open, all sharing the haunting similarity of vanishing without a trace. Forensic analysts meticulously documented each carving, noting the varying depths and aging patterns. The oldest name, Rebecca Hansen, tied back to a disappearance from decades ago, a young woman who had ventured into the woods never to return, leaving behind only a hiking boot by a stream. Mason's innocence seemed certain as his background yielded no connections to the other names. Attention turned to his friends, and the group photographer, Emily Chen, unknowingly provided a clue in her photos, a shadowy figure that appeared in the background, unseen by the hikers on their journey. A search of the house interior unveiled a chilling revelation in the basement, a meticulous collection of personal items belonging to the missing hikers, each labeled with a corresponding name from the wall outside. Bloodstains on the floor hinted at dark deeds, and the cadaver dog's alerts near the dense forest at the back of the property only deepened the mystery. As the investigation delved further, Mason's behavior grew increasingly erratic, plagued by inexplicable occurrences that left him feeling hunted and haunted. The discovery of land records tied the house to a reclusive hunter, Victor Blackwood, whose unsettling past hinted at a sinister purpose for the house and its grim decorations. A search of the surrounding forest uncovered Blackwood's disturbing journal, detailing his predatory pursuits and the meticulous selection of his victims. The manhunt for Blackwood ensued, but the elusive hunter remained one step ahead, leaving only a chilling message on Mason's bedroom wall, signaling a deadly turn of events. Despite exhaustive efforts, Mason and the forensic technician vanished without a trace, leaving behind a chilling reminder in the form of a freshly carved name hidden in the house's basement. The authorities set a watchful eye on the house, waiting for the inevitable return of the phantom figure that haunted the woods. To this day, the house stands under vigilant surveillance, a silent witness to the unsettling events that transpired within its walls. The names on the wall have become a whispered legend, striking fear into the hearts of those who dare to speak of the house at the edge of the woods, where the shadows hold secrets too dark to utter aloud. Story 26. In the quiet suburban neighborhood, where shadows danced lazily on manicured lawns and secrets lingered in the whispers of the wind, a mystery unfolded. It began with a simple arrival, a plain envelope, devoid of return address, bearing a single brass key weathered with time. The homeowner, Sarah Miller, puzzled by its unfamiliarity yet drawn to its enigmatic presence, tried the key in every lock she owned, only to find them all unmoved by its touch. Perplexed, she placed the key on her coffee table, where the stagnant air was suddenly pierced by a solitary, haunting chime from the long silent grandfather clock in the hallway. A shiver ran down Sarah's spine, awakening a sense of unease that settled like a heavy fog in her mind. Upon reporting the strange occurrence to the authorities, Sarah unwittingly unraveled a tangled web of darkness that had lurked beneath the surface of her seemingly ordinary life. The responding officer, quick to dismiss her concerns as mere happenstance, accepted the key as evidence, unaware of the sinister path it would lead them down. Detective Robert Harmon, a seasoned investigator with a penchant for unraveling the threads of the inexplicable, found himself drawn into a case that defied logic and reason. The brass key, unassuming yet foreboding, sat on his desk like a silent sentinel of the unknown, beckoning him to delve deeper into its cryptic origins. Background checks revealed Sarah to be a woman of unblemished history, a retired teacher, a widow, a mother. Yet beneath the surface of her seemingly ordinary existence lurked a darkness she had never fathomed. The forensic team's meticulous examination yielded no fingerprints but Sarah's on the key, no clues in the envelope except a nondescript postmark. It was only when Detective Harmon decided to delve into the key's unique identity that the case took a chilling turn. A cold case, long forgotten, resurfaced a storage unit harboring unspeakable horrors, linked by the intricate pattern of the brass key in Sarah's possession. As the investigation unfolded, the tendrils of a malevolent past reached out, entwining Sarah in a web of fear and uncertainty. New locks adorned her doors, a security system stood guard over her home, yet the question lingered like a specter in the night: why had the key found its way to her? The hunt for the elusive Harold Jenkins, a man of shadows and secrets, intensified as his macabre trail of atrocities was unearthed. From a concealed room beneath a cabin's floorboards to the grisly remains buried behind it, the true extent of his depravity came to light: a twisted gallery of lives cut short, each key a silent witness to unspeakable horrors. As the manhunt culminated in a final, harrowing confrontation, Jenkins's own words echoed through the darkness, a chilling testament to his twisted obsession with Sarah. The key that opened nothing but a Pandora's box of nightmares, a reflection of the darkness that can lurk behind the most unassuming of facades. And so, as the dust settled on a case that had shaken the foundations of a community, Sarah found herself adrift in a sea of unanswered questions, haunted by the knowledge that evil had brushed so close to her ordinary life. The clock's hollow chime, once a harbinger of dread, now a reminder of the fragility of peace in a world where monsters wear masks of normalcy. In the quiet of an evidence locker, a collection of brass keys sits in solemn silence, a silent testimony to lives extinguished too soon, each key a symbol of the darkness that can lurk within the heart of humanity. And as the night falls and the whispers of the wind fade into the stillness of slumber, the mystery of the brass key lingers on a reminder that even in the calmest of nights, shadows dance on the edge of dreams, waiting to be unlocked by those brave enough to seek the truth. Story 27. As she cleared the mist from the mirror, her reflection stared back at her. Yet a subtle unease lingered in the air. Her features appeared normal, her attire unchanged. But the longer she gazed, the more a sense of disquiet crept in. A fleeting movement caught in the corner of her eye, a shift that wasn't her own, and when she turned away, the reflection remained motionless, observing her every move. This eerie moment marked the beginning of Rebecca Thorne's perplexing journey. A tale that would baffle investigators and haunt the community for years to come. Residing in a modest apartment in a serene suburban enclave, Rebecca led a solitary life. Known among friends for her precision and reserved nature, she maintained a cordial relationship with her neighbors while immersing herself in the world of data analysis at a mid-sized company. Her existence revolved around routines and meticulousness, giving no hint that she would soon become entwined in one of the most enigmatic criminal puzzles of the decade. The initial signs were subtle. Objects in her home seemed slightly rearranged, with no items missing, just a subtle shift in placement. A mug on a different shelf, books realigned, the toothbrush out of place. At first, Rebecca brushed off these anomalies as mere lapses in memory, attributing them to long hours spent poring over spreadsheets under harsh fluorescent lights, straining her vision. It wasn't until weeks of these disruptions had passed that Rebecca finally reached out to the authorities, prompting Detective Marion Shaw to delve into the peculiar case. Initially deemed a matter for mental health services rather than law enforcement, the reports of odd occurrences in Rebecca's apartment lacked concrete evidence of criminal activity. There was a sense of unease, testified Shaw, a feeling of something amiss within her own walls. However, it was the chilling incident with the bathroom mirror that altered the course of the investigation. During her subsequent encounter with the police, Rebecca recounted the unsettling episode with vivid detail, how her reflections seemed to move independently, how an unshakable sense of being watched engulfed her even in solitude. The turning point arrived with the surveillance footage from a camera Rebecca had installed, capturing a duplicate of herself entering the apartment shortly after she had left for work. A perfect replica, down to the smallest detail, mirroring her actions with eerie precision. Forensic scrutiny of the footage revealed no signs of tampering, raising the chilling possibility of a doppelganger meticulously mimicking Rebecca's every move. The investigation deepened as fingerprints throughout the apartment exclusively matched Rebecca's, with no trace of foreign DNA. Neighbors reported mundane sightings of Rebecca coming and going, unaware of the sinister shadow that lurked behind the facade of normalcy. Mrs. Keller recounted an encounter with Rebecca that went unanswered, a subtle anomaly that hinted at a more profound disturbance. Documenting each subtle alteration in her living space, Rebecca's journal became a chronicle of escalating disturbances. Food vanished mysteriously, unexplained searches appeared on her computer, and eerie selfies surfaced on her phone capturing a distorted version of herself, a chilling mimicry that hinted at a malevolent presence invading her life. The breakthrough emerged when a pattern surfaced in the security footage, revealing the doppelganger's calculated entries during specific absences in Rebecca's routine. A fixation case postulated a forensic psychologist, where an individual obsessively emulates their victim, fixating on their desired attributes and ultimately seeking to supplant them. Mention of a former colleague, Lily Winters, cast a chilling light on the investigation. Dismissed for erratic behavior, Lily's unsettling emails to Rebecca hinted at an unsettling obsession with assuming her identity. A search of Lily's residence unearthed a disturbing shrine-like replication of Rebecca's life, a meticulous imitation down to the minutest detail, echoing a twisted desire to erase Rebecca and usurp her existence. The revelation of sophisticated surveillance equipment and detailed records of Rebecca's routines underscored Lily's disturbing fixation. However, Lily's disappearance prior to her arrest left a chilling void, signaling her successful infiltration into Rebecca's life. Rebecca, now under constant vigilance in a secure location, found herself ensnared in a nightmarish battle for her identity. The final twist unraveled when security footage revealed an imposter resembling Rebecca infiltrating her former workplace, assuming her role with unsettling precision. A haunting realization dawned: Lily had seamlessly assumed Rebecca's identity, eclipsing the real Rebecca in a chilling usurpation. As Lily eluded capture, Rebecca opted to forge a new identity in seclusion, leaving behind the specter of her former self. Detective Shaw, haunted by the intertwined fates of two eerily similar women, pondered the depths of identity theft. She often mused to her colleagues, "It's not the resemblance that chills, but the desire to become another so fervently that one loses themselves in the process. Our identities are our most precious possession, safeguarded against those who seek to claim them." And so, the enigma of Rebecca Thorne and Lily Winters lingers, a tale of twisted obsessions and stolen identities, shrouded in the shadows of a mystery that remains unresolved.